Um, so I'm Julian Mangano. As Taylor mentioned, I have a small farm up here in Castorland, and I'm also the farm administrator for Restore Forward, an organization that's based in Avon, Boonville, New York. I guess with this particular presentation, we just want to share the work that Black Farmers United is doing throughout the state to enhance opportunities for aspiring Black farmers, for current Black farmers, and yeah, the 9 solutions that are being worked on to push that forward. Black Farmers United is an organization that started after, like basically during the pandemic. There was a diversity and racial equity working group that happened with New York State Ag and Markets. And through that, with various stakeholders that came together, Black Farmers United basically came to the foray to help solve the issues and problems that exist for, Black farmers throughout the state. In 1910, there was 134,181 Black residents in New York State and 295 Black farmers. And 100 years later, that New York Black residents number increased substantially, but the number of Black farmers has decreased, right? So it's an unfortunate phenomenon. It's something we're trying to highlight as an organization and push policy-wise in front of the state. Right here is an overlook of, you can see it, but of just the overall numbers. So the Black farmer share is 0.01% of the $42 billion New York State agricultural industry. The annual net income is negative $903. Black farmers make $1 for every $5 white farmers make, and Black farmers comprise only 0.24% or 139 out of the 57,000 New York State farmers. To try to push forward solutions, we've comprised 9 to try to enhance and increase the number of Black farmers. We have different pathways for farmers to engage in mentorships and on-farm opportunities. And there's an ecosystem. So beyond, and I think it's in the slide, but it's right here. Okay, Black Farmer Fund, Northeast Farmers of Color, Farm School, provides a certificate program, have navigators to ensure people know what kind of programs and resources exist, put together scholarships to ensure that folks can engage more education, data collection. There's currently a mapping project that exists, and the pilot program is centered in the Ithaca area, just so we can use a mapping network to ensure that folks can access each other and, be able to communicate and help each other out to build themselves in agriculture. Solutions 1 and 2, pathways for Black guest workers, migrant workers, and undocumented farm workers to become business-owning producers. Number 2, we're working to obtain $10 million for Black Farmers Fund. It's the first Black farmer-led 501c3 community investment fund. There have been 2 rounds of funding that the Black Farmers Fund has provided, and they've also provided emergency relief funds with some pandemic dollars, and that's been really helpful. It helped, like I was a recipient of some of the funds because I had a high tunnel come down, and that was really beneficial. Solution 3 and 4, 400 acres to the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, which provides affordable land access to Indigenous and Black farmers and earth keepers. Solution 4 is to have different certificate programs that generally right now is going through farm school down in New York City, but there's other opportunities that folks can engage in. If people find other certificate programs that aren't in the ecosystem, then that can help enhance their experience. Sorry if I'm just flying through this. Solutions 5 and 6, fund Black-led urban farms, create pathways and priorities for urban farmers to access empty lots, permanently protect urban farms with conservation easements, and support Black farmers in building urban rural pathways for growing. There's been a lot of partnership engagement occurring with the urban and innovative production work group and leg of the USDA to help push forward the urban farm initiatives and the urban agricultural element of the USDA. And we're seeing some positive things moving forward there. Solution 6, ensure Black people are included as farmland for a new generation New York navigators. In that vein, we've been moving forward with the Department of Ag, with the Diversity and Racial Equity Working Group that meets every other month and tries to connect statewide stakeholders in the agricultural community. Solution 7 and 8 provide full scholarships to Black students pursuing SUNY agricultural degrees. Solution 8, improve data collection to identify who and where our state's Black farmers are. And then finally, Solution 9, combine and refine these solutions to move forward a comprehensive plan to keep moving the vibrations forward to increase the number of Black farmers in the state. Right now, we're generally seeking to engage more cooperatives and collaborative efforts, build out aggregate food hubs. There's a organization, Brooklyn Packers, that we've been working together to build a network throughout the state to try to, get food from the Hudson Valley up to the central New York, Western New York, and then bring all that food back down. And I want to include the North Country, and we're slowly striving. I think here in Ava, we can build a pretty decent level food hub, and that's in motion. But yeah, is there any questions?
I'll make a comment. It's really exciting to see this initiative. No farms, no food, right? I think as we go forward into a very climatically unstable future, we're going to need all hands on deck to come up with solutions that keep our humans alive. And it's really exciting to see this.
No, I totally agree.
A lot of resources here, and just curious how you attract more people into farming. I don't know. I mean, all these organizations, I guess, are doing that sort of outreach. I mean, are you approaching universities in that kind of direction also, or?
Yeah, there's been connections with Medgar Evers. They're rolling out various ag-based programs, farm school in and of itself. Like, they've trained hundreds of farmers throughout their lifespan since they started in 2010. And then the collaborative partnerships that exist with the different farms, like Rise and Root Farm, they're a part of the Tester cooperative farm. Like, there's a huge food hub down there. Rocky Acres Farm and the Wild Seed Farm community, they're doing a lot of on-site training initiatives. And a lot of the explosion is happening in the Hudson Valley for people to, kind of release themselves from the city and, you know, touch, feel, taste what it means to be in the soil. And it's been solid. It's a lot of positive motion that's been happening, and we're just hoping to continue to strive forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thanks for presenting this. It's really inspiring. It seems like the onus so far of pushing improvements has been on you and your colleagues, which isn't right to me. So is there anything that we can do to help? Is there, you know, can we write to our legislators, or is there anything concrete that we can like push for to, you know, to help your efforts?
So I think one of the big elements are funding, right? Like that's always something that's needed. But obviously, writing legislators, we do have funding coming in from the state through Governor Hochul. And we have a pretty solid support with the policy initiatives. But yeah, anything in terms of like outreach engagement with your stakeholders and just building awareness of the deficiencies and disparities that exist, that's always helpful to keep it in folks' minds and know that there are individuals that are seeking to grow and expand within agriculture that aren't necessarily fully represented, obviously, with the data presented in the state. So, yeah. And even like the land access piece, you know, we've spoken with individuals from American Farmland Trust, NEFOC, Northeast Farmers of Color, have been involved with them, and just trying to figure out more like mutually beneficial leasing agreements with folks when land is provided and made accessible to individuals, or just like more solid land transition programs that can exist, so people can get access to the land they need and potentially infrastructure to build farms. I hope that answers your question. I think Nicole has her hand up.
Yeah, Nicole, would you like to chime in?
Yes, Taylor. Good morning, everyone. I also co-chair committee with Julian, and the problem that I see with Black and brown farmers, we're not getting the information, right? I was I've managed about 10 hemp farms, right? I came into the hemp industry kind of heavy with Amish farmers. It took me 4 years to get a farm number. Okay. I was working with 4 or 5 different counties, the information, the disconnect, the non-communication back and forth, not having clarity in order to complete those documents because they are pretty heavy. It was something as simple as telling me that I need to do it, fill out the forms in my name and in my company's name, right? That I spoke to numerous people with the FSA that never said that. And when one person really decided to really help me, I was able to get 4 farm numbers. But that is crucial to even getting any funding for your farm. A lot of my farms, we have off farm jobs to just be able to supplement to feed their family, right? I live in the city. I manage farms upstate. Just getting the information to people in the city that are farming, it's really, really crucial. And getting the information from the people upstate that wants to do business in the city, right? Because we can buy local, we can use local grown crops in the city as opposed to bringing stuff from the Carolinas or other places, right? Hunts Point is the largest hub as far as food. A lot of the food is not organic. It's not, so these are things that I kind of fight for and advocate for on behalf of Black and brown farmers. Because as a farmer, these are things that, I struggled with in the beginning, so thank you.
Thank you. I'll just point out, you guys have an awesome website with lots of links to ways that, you know, we can be involved. So thank you.
Marissa,
Yeah,
do you have a
thank
question?
you.
I just wanted to like go off of Nicole's point if I could. I thought that was a really good point about communication and like how we can help to communicate with black and brown like populations in a better way, like how they want to be communicated with. So Nicole, if I could just ask, like, how did you bridge that gap? Because that seems like you were really like you identified that that was a struggle you were having and were able to overcome that.
Persistency and just not giving up and just like, you know, every time they closed the door, I was kicking down another. I mean, and just being real adamant about getting the help because the help is out there, right? But if you don't know about it, then you won't know. And when I started my company, I wasn't sure how hemp would do. So I was specific in building processes to be able to do grant funding, to do community-based work. So I do a lot of community based work in the city, you know, with my community garden. So that's how I'm able to really survive and through procurements and bids that my company has the ability to do. So that was one way I learned how to get registered with a lot of these organizations that have funding for New York on a state level and a federal level. I attended meetings, I sent emails. I mean, I can go on, but I'm someone that does extensive research on things, and that's really how, and just really not being a gatekeeper, spreading the information also with other people that are in my community that are looking for these services as well, and just kind of like helping guide them a little bit, you know, because there was really no guide on anything that I was trying to do when I got started. The main thing I knew I wanted to grow and I wanted to have farms, and I started in the community gardens in the city.
To the point about information outreach and like, I don't know, basically creating easier navigation for folks with USDA programming. I do serve on the advisory committee on minority farmers with the USDA and the FSA state committee. And there have been efforts to work more collaboratively with CBOs and on the ground organizations to establish better outreach and more comfortability with individuals to navigate the various programs. And additionally, like recommendations to definitively change how the USDA processes the applications for folks who aren't generally overtly represented in farming. So that's positive. It's a slow, snail-paced motion with some of this stuff, but I think it's coming from different directions and different pivot points. So we'll get there. I have faith in that. I think Vicky had another question. Okay.
I will say, I know it doesn't help in a broad sense, but no, sometimes even when I'm working on projects, you go online, you just see a phone number, and that phone number leads you to an extension, which leads you to another phone number. So even locally, if there's interest, part of what I do is working with some of the agricultural groups that we have in the region, including in Jefferson County. We have a pretty good IDA, and they have their own agricultural council and regular meetings and events and stuff like that. And sometimes it's those connections with those people that really, you know, it's not the obvious infrastructure that you see when you look online or anything like that, but it absolutely is helpful. And if anyone had any questions, at least in the region, people to talk to, please reach out to your partners, like, you know, Tug Hill Commission. We can at least help point you in the right direction with some of the folks that we do, because it took years and years to make inroads in our own community as well. Vicky, you have a question? No? Oh, Julian, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Why that keeps happening. Sorry.
You're all good.
Well,
Yep, we got you now.
you can hear me?
Yes.
So I think it was spring of 2023. I was working with the Tug Hill Commission. They were on organics waste work group with me. That's going to start again in the next couple months for Lewis County because there's a grant coming down the pipeline for municipal organic waste. So it'll be exciting. I'm excited about that. But thank you all.
I think Gabriel Yurden, my coworker, has mentioned.
Gabriel. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Well, are there any last questions before we switch over to our next presentation? Thank you, Julian, so much.
Yeah, I have a question, Taylor. Will this be available? Because I have a hard stop. I have another meeting.
Yes, everything is being recorded. All the logistics will run through my colleague, Julian Lee, but because it's being recorded, I imagine we'll be able to edit and chop things up, and it should be even the slide decks most likely. So absolutely reach out to us if you have any questions in the follow-up. We'll be trimming and tidying things up shortly after.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you so much, Julian. We really appreciate it. I think what we'll do is we've got a couple minutes until the next session starts, but all sorts of wonderful tech things happen. So let's try and set up Thijs for his presentation. Bear with me.
I have to jump. There's so much going on. Good luck with your presentation, Thijs. I'm going to watch it when I have time. You guys have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
All right, Thijs, I just made you co-host of this session, so that should enable you to share your screen if you have a PowerPoint.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay.
Let me get it.
All right. And while you're getting that booted up, I'm going to apologize in advance. Hopefully I pronounced the name right, but to everyone here, this is the Natural Resources Economy and Opportunities track, and our next presentation is going to be Sustainability Practices at the Hermann J. Wiemer Vineyard, and our speaker is Thijs Verschuuren. I hope I got that right. The vineyard manager at the Hermann J. Wiemer Vineyard in Dundee, New York. So thank you for being here. Much appreciated.
So can you see my presentation right now?
I can't see it at this point in time, just you.
Okay, so I never used this before, unfortunately.
I think I do have a backup of the PDF of your presentation if needed. I could always share that from my end.
Okay. Nice, sorry. Let's see, how do you... Do you see anything now?
Not right this second. Here, let me download your presentation. I can always share it on my end, and you can just tell me when to push the button over to the next
Okay.
page. I'll share my screen. All right. Can everyone see this okay? I apologize, it's not the full screen experience.
All right, so good morning all. My name is Thijs. I'm the Vineyard Director for Hermann J. Wiemer Vineyards in New York. We are located in the Finger Lakes. We grow only grapes and only vinifera's. We are not the only Demeter certified vineyards and winery on the East Coast of the US. We got certified last year in April 2023. So now this is the second vintage. And as we speak right now, we are actually harvesting grapes. So we are also New York Wine and Grape Sustainable Wine Growing Certified. It's another certification for us, which is like a big accomplishment for us. Overall, the farm produced 200 acres of grapes, but we are only certified on 33 acres of vines. The reason why, where we are certified, we are like isolated from other growers. The other blocks that we own are surrounded by other growers that are not certified, or like not organic, not biodynamic certified. They're all like conventional product. So Demeter certification doesn't allow us to certify those fruit because of like cross-contamination with pesticide and fungicide and herbicide. So for us, we are only certified on 33 acres. So we have biodynamic farming. I don't know if all of you know about biodynamic farming. It's a holistic system. It's it's using like organic farming tools, but adding some like spiritual to everything. Believing in energy, and we're using moon phases and constellation phases. So this is kind of like the basic of like biodynamic farming. So if you want to go up, sorry. So it's also like respecting the earth, and to grow grapes the perfect way, you need to have a balanced soil. You need to have a balanced vines. So we start with cover cropping. Most of the growers in the Finger Lakes, they don't do any cover crop. We are spacing, we have 8-foot rows. And in these 8-foot rows, people grow just grass, only grass. And for us, it's mind-blowing. For us, it's like, no, we have like this 8-foot rows of grass that we can grow something else in it that helps, the soil, that helps like beneficials. So we do like, we do mostly clover. Why only clover? It's just because it's a low maintenance cover crop. We play with rye a lot, and the problem is like you have to mow all the time. So you're adding carbon impact. You keep driving equipment over it, so it doesn't make any sense. So rate for clover is extremely high. The recommended is 5 pounds to the acre. For us, we do 12 pounds to the acre. It's just the idea of like a thick layer, having a thick layer of clover and cover crop, just to help with the erosion. As we all know, the last couple of years, we're having issues with heavy downpour rain, and we saw a lot of erosion. 3 years ago, the winery got flooded, and all the mud from the vineyards came inside the winery. So it's not a fun task for us to do to clean up. So we do a heavy, thick layer of cover crop. As I mentioned earlier, so we grow here on this farm 33 acres of vines, but we have 55 acres for biodiversity. So we have woods for like, deer and foxes and all the animals that in the like upstate New York. We have like buckwheat field, we have sunflower field. We have a lot to attract beneficials. We had northeast wide flower mix to attract beneficials. If you come to the vineyards right now, you'll see monarch butterflies everywhere. It's unbelievable. Like this is what we have tried to accomplish, because all the insects that we try to attract help us fight any diseases or other insects. And we don't use no herbicides since 2003. We were the first winery in the Finger Lakes not using any herbicide, and we're still doing it. So we're doing like on the vine cultivation, which is like, it's a very slow task, but it works pretty well. So on the next slide, you will see a couple of pictures of the crimson clover that we use in a cover crop. The next slide, we have this is the yellow street clover. So on the left, it's prior the undervine cultivation, and on the right side, you can see it's after the undervine cultivation. So as I tell a lot of people in the Finger Lakes, you can do without herbicide. It works. It takes time, but it works, and it's safer for the environment and for the people and for the lakes. I mean, we are like 2 minutes away from the lake. So if you go to the next slide. So we have sheep in our vineyards. We have 25 sheep that help us graze, that help us like clean up under the vines, that helps leaf pull. So we have 25 of them. We do rotation on different blocks. They are so sweet. We love them. They all have a name. My kids, every time they come here, they name them Bumblebee and Frutu Tata, and so we get very attached to them. So this is where like it also can be difficult having sheep in a vineyard. It adds on to the workload because most of the vineyards in the Finger Lakes, we're just growing grapes. For us, we have livestock. We have sheep, geese, and sheep, geese, and chickens. I saw a question. Let me look at the question. Do you cut down the cover crop before they go to seed to control the growth and use the green matter? Yes, we do. We crimp the cover crop to control the growth, and the yellow sweet clover can grow like very tall. And with the crimper, the roller crimper, it helps cut it because crimson clover and red clover, the crimper doesn't do anything. But yeah, so we send the sheep to clean up the clover first, and after we crimp the yellow sweet clover. So if you go to the next pictures, so those are the sheep again. So those, if you go down, we have a picture of the geese. So those are cotton patch geese. It's a heritage geese that we use in the South for weeding cotton fields. Nobody uses them anymore in the South because, herbicide. So we have 15 of them. They are not doing the job what we want them to do. They harass customers mostly. So this is always a big issue for us. But they're very sweet. They are very sweet animals. And they still weed, like they come in the vineyards and just eat the grass between the vines. That help us a lot. And if you go to the next picture, we have those chickens. We have like usually 50 chickens at the beginning of the season. We finish by 25. We have foxes issues. So this is the downside. They are open range. They go in the vineyards. We used to have like Japanese beetle issues. Japanese beetle, mostly issues in the vineyards that we lose like plants, like the whole canopy will be gone. And since we introduced the chickens in the vineyards, we don't have any more Japanese beetle. And we get free eggs, which is also a very good deal for us. So if you go to the next slide, for me, so this is the sunflower, and I took this picture. You can see actually a honeybee going straight to the sunflower. So we have 25 beehives. I do not manage them. We have a Mennonite local farmer that take care of all the honeys. But yeah, we have 25 beehives, and so the goal is just to attract beneficials, help the earth. We only like 33 acres, but if everybody do this on 33 acres of land, that'd be fantastic. Do you have some question about cover crop before I move into the spray program? I can answer a few questions. All good? Our spray program. So we did Demeter certification. So we did Demeter biodynamic farming certification. We are extremely limited on fungicide and pesticide that we can use. So no synthetic pesticide allowed. So like, I'm sure some of the farmers knows like product like Pencozeb, Ziram. Those products are absolutely not allowed in a certification. It has to be at least OMRI certified product. So I'm certified by the organic USD organic certification. So I'm allowed to use copper. I'm allowed to use only 3 pounds of pure copper per acre per year. So if some of you don't know like exactly what it means, if you open a bag of copper, on the label, it say like copper equivalent. Sometimes it say like, 1%, 5%, 75%. So it's the amount of like pure copper that you're allowed to use. I have Haven Colgate. Ask me a question. I'm sorry.
I didn't have a question, but I actually do have a question, but I'll save it for the end. I'm sorry if I raised my hand.
No,
by
no, it's okay.
accident.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So I use only copper on a very like specific time of the season, the growing season. It's bloom. The Finger Lakes, we are still like dealing with heavy humidity, heavy rain. So we are dealing with like downy mildew, black rot, and powdery mildew. Black rot is the only fungus that it's very difficult to get control. So copper for me is the only way for me to help fight and control the diseases. So I only use copper post-bloom, and knock on wood, so far it's been working since 2019. I'm allowed to use sulfur. I will use like maybe I would say like 18 pounds sulfur in total per year. Otherwise, I use like cinnamon, thyme oil. There was rosemary oil that I use quite a lot, and I make teas. I make horsetail teas, a lot of horsetail tea, lavender tea. I will do like stinging nettle, chamomile tea. I do like a cinnamon tea, like an orange peel tea. So basically, if you the picture look down on the next slide, I brew basically those herbs in old wine tanks that the winemaker gave it to me for this, and I brew them. They macerate for like 48 hours, and after I spray the vineyards with it. So this looks like a beautiful pictures, but the downside of like what we are doing with the teas is I need to spray like almost like once a week. So I need to spray like once a week, get my tractor, get my sprayer, load the sprayer, and spend like 12 hours on the sprayer. That a conventional farmer will spray maybe every 2 weeks. So for us, like this is where we are still trying to figure that out, how to using less and less tractors, and less like diesel impact, less like compaction, because the compaction it's a big issue for us. So we just invest into an electric tractor. So hopefully next year we can solve the diesel issue in our vineyards. If you want to go to the next slide for me, please. So I use also like a tunnel sprayer. So when I use copper, just because copper is toxic for the soil, as I like when you like add too much, and also copper is toxic for the sheep. You can give copper to cows, goats, chickens, and geese, but sheep cannot have copper in the system. It can kill them. So this kind of sprayer basically recycle all the pesticide drift or all the chemical that doesn't go in the vineyards. So basically there's no like drenching on the floor. So this is we have a 2-row tunnel sprayer. And I think we are the only winery in the Finger Lakes having one of those. So if you want to go to the next slide. So those are the grapes that I took last week. We have Gewürztraminer on the left side, and we have Riesling on the right side. We grow, so Riesling on this farm, Chardonnay, and Gewürztraminer, and we are planting Cabernet Franc next year. We average to a 3 ton to the acre, 2 or 3 tons per acre of fruit. This is kind of like a goal we're having, and this is kind of like what we are doing here. I hope I didn't speak too fast for you guys, but please ask me questions right now. If you go to the last slide, I have my email address and my phone number. Do not hesitate to call me and text me. What we are doing here at Wiemer Vineyards, I want more people to do it in the Finger Lakes. 3 years ago, we started a apprenticeship program, and The idea is like having interns that come here to learn about what we are doing, and after that, like move to another winery to help the winery change their practices. We know that climate change is a thing, and we know that it's not gonna get better. So everything that we can do to help grow grapes a better way, sustainable way. Sustainable is always a hard word, because people, yeah, we're sustainable by the environment. But we calculated the cost of growing grapes this way. On biodynamic farming, we have a 30% labor increase for that. But for us, it's like, we can cover the cost of it pretty easily. And now we're looking to be certified B, we're new certification. We want to keep, moving forward and in that regard. So certified B for us is the next certification we're looking into. So like better, better pay for everybody, a better environment for everybody, all the employees that we have here that help us a lot. And I can't thank enough all the the team that we're having in the vineyards to help us. Without them, there was no way I can do it. And if people are telling you it's impossible to grow organic and biodynamic in the Finger Lakes or upstate New York, they are wrong. It's possible. You just need to put love into it, time. It's true. Like my kids and my wife, sometimes unhappy on a Saturday afternoon when I need to go spray the vineyards, but they love also coming in on Sunday morning and see they can, eat the cluster and touch the canopy without having toxic product, on the fingers. And yeah, and in the soil and in the lake. Again, we are surrounded by lakes in the Finger Lakes, and people swim in the lake, people fish in the lake. And if we keep adding, herbicide and pesticide, it's not good. It's not good. All right, I'm ready for some questions.
Haven, go ahead, please.
So thank you. That was beautiful. And I'm very impressed with your vineyard. My question throughout the presentation was whether, and you kind of answered this sort of, whether you have a theory about why more vineyard owners don't start adopting these practices. Maybe it's they don't love enough. That was one of the things you mentioned, but I just thought your thoughts on that, I would love to hear.
There are a few things. Some of them is just it's a new winery, so it's a huge investment for the winery, and it's a lot of a risk that we are taking. We are every year, every day. We are taking the risk of a crop loss, because you never know what can happen tomorrow with the weather. And a lot of people, they don't want to change. And the wine industry right now is in a gray area. There's less people are consuming less wine, so people don't want to invest in the new way to farm thing, because the problem is having the sheep in the vineyards. Well, I need a sheep shelter, I need new fencing, I need somebody to take care of it. So it's hiring a person full time for that. So having a sheep in your vineyards is not bringing you money directly. Indirectly, it does it, because you bring your costs down of driving tractors, but it's still it's hard for new winery to get this system. There's a few producers in the Finger Lakes are trying to, but not at the scale we are doing right now, and unfortunately. But yeah, maybe 10 years we have new generation of growers coming in, and they are very looking into those kind of practices. And also consumers are now asking transparency about everything we're doing. This year we're doing farm tours, so we have customers that come to the winery, and we do a 2-hour farm tour. They can have a photo up with the sheep, they can look at the vineyards, the cover crop, and see what we're doing, and they can taste some wine later. And some people are looking into those information now, because there was some abuse. And if you look, it's starting next year. If you buy a wine from any producer in the US, you will see that in the back label there will be ingredients, because consumer needs to know what's in the wine. But to answer your question, yes, Some people want to try it, but it's a lot of risk to take, and they are not willing to take the risk yet.
Do you think there are like small things that a commercial grower could adopt? Like, for example, not growing grass and instead growing clover, or is it a whole package? Because when they use the pesticides, they'll kill the clover, or maybe there's some sort of like gateway entry point that some farmers around you might think to do.
So we are starting not using herbicide. So 2000 is that be 20 years with no herbicide. So I always tell people when they ask questions, like ask me, how did you do it? Well, it's like, it's baby step. You cannot do like, hey, I'm gonna do like day one, it's like I'm conventional farmer. Day two, I'm gonna be like 100% organic farming. It doesn't work that way. It takes time. It takes soil, resilience. It takes understanding. And this is where, like, where I tell people, we started in 15 on 4-acre block. This is how we started, 4-acre block. This is what we started with. And now we're moving into 33 acres. And now we will be on 78 acres certified. It's baby step. It's baby step. And so this is how, like, I tell people to do it. And some people are doing it. They don't do the next step, say, hey, let's do on a bigger acreage yet. But there's people looking into those kind of practices.
I'll just point out you have a question in the chat as well. Do you cut down the cover crops before they go to seed?
Yeah, I answered that question earlier, but yes, we have the sheep for like graze the crimson clover and red clover. The yellow sweet clover usually grow a little bit after, and so this one we roller crimp this one. And to give you an example, like number, if you want like a number, the blocks that we don't have the sheep in, we do 7 passes with the mower. And the block that we use the sheep in, we do only 2 passes per season. So the sheep are helping us a lot.
This is a really interesting topic, but we do need to start switching over to the next presentation soon. Thijs, thank you very much for sharing your contact information. Everybody, I think if you have any other questions, please direct them to us or him. We're happy to pass them along. Thijs, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation and your time today. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Yeah, please contact me if you have any question or any like advice. We're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
And our next presentation is Adirondack North Country Association Compost for Good. Our speaker will be Jennifer Perry. She's the Compost for Good coordinator and organics recycling coordinator at the Adirondack North Country Association, or simply ANCA as we know them. So Jennifer, let me make you a co-host. Beautiful. And should be able to share your screen. Let me know if there's any issues with that.
Okay. Are you guys seeing it?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Still good?
On the money.
Okay, awesome. Should I dive right in or give folks a chance to transition a little bit?
I think everyone who's in the natural resources track, they're pretty much logged in all day, unless they're swapping, but I think mostly people are staying in their track. But feel free to introduce yourself if you'd like and take it away.
Beautiful. And I'm 10:05 is what's my target time to wrap up?
Yes, 10:05.
Including questions, right? Done like the whole.
Yes, ma'am.
The enchilada. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm co-host, right? Like if people are in the waiting room, you're managing.
Yeah, I'll handle attendance, and I'll pass on questions if you like, but you have access to the chat also if you want to just answer questions directly from there.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for hosting us. Again, I'm Jennifer Perry. I am with the Adirondack North Country Association, or ANCA. And one of the, ANCA has a few programs. We have an entrepreneurial program, we have a clean energy program, and we have a local food system program, which is in the process of being kind of redesigned. Within the food system program, we have an initiative that I co-launched a few years ago called Compost for Good, which I'll elaborate on as we go through the presentation. But basically, there's 3 of us. However, 2 of the 3 of us are currently on some version of medical leave, but it includes myself and John Culpepper. As you can see, oops, wrong button. As you can see in the middle slide, John tends to be our scientist and microscopist, and Katie, his daughter, has in the past been the education outreach coordinator type person. All three of us live, breathe, eat, sleep composting. We all compost ourselves. I own and operate a community scale composting food scrap hauling business in the Plattsburgh area. John has launched a human urine research facility in Jay. So if anybody wants to hear about that, it's he just issued a great press release. And Katie just composts on her own and supports her dad too as things go along. So this is our vision mission statement. And the one thing I'll say about composting in general is that, and this is especially in today's era of extreme political dichotomies, that it doesn't matter where you are, where you lie, composting, gardening, soil health, everybody comes together in that platform. We all eat. So it's this is something I believe passionately in. So Compost for Good offers support through technical assistance, education, outreach, peer-to-peer connections, research. So that's all kind of just like rhetoric, but really what it comes down to is if you're interested in community scale composting, we're here to support you. So we spend a lot of time listening, asking questions, and just hearing from the universe what kind of support is needed to promote more processing of organic material into soil health building materials. So I just want to take a few minutes to a little bit into the why composting is important concept. And again, composting, there's lots of ways of referencing it. Organics recycling is another way, because a lot of people think about, if you guys were all in the room, I'd ask you this question, what do you think composting is? And a lot of people are like, food scraps. People even call food scraps compost. And it technically isn't. It's actually a feedstock. Food scraps is one of, as we talked about, urine is another one, animal mortalities, insects, there's all kinds of things that can be composted and turned into compost. So there's two ways of thinking about this issue. One is from the landfill reduction side of things, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But the other side, and that's again why I love this whole process, is because over here you've got something that an organic material that treated as waste is landfilled or thrown in the dump or thrown over the side of a bank, piled up in your backyard, and it causes all kinds of damage. And then over here, if you can convert those waste materials into a resource, they can help build soil health in all kinds of amazing and magical and beautiful ways. So I just threw this quote up here from Wendell Berry, who folks who are of my vintage probably are quite familiar with Wendell. So this is just a few slides to talk about why food waste composting is really important. And if you want to maybe chime in the chat, if you do compost at home, I would love to hear that. That's always, whenever we table, we get inundated with people. This is something a lot of people practice and do, which is fantastic. And just to clarify, community scale composting, when we say that, we're talking about usually it's a little bigger than the backyard, so it might be a neighborhood scale up into like a community scale. So industrial composting isn't really, that's not something we necessarily support. Not philosophically, but that by work, that's not what we do. So everything that we eat, every time we put something into our mouths, it comes from someplace. And probably folks on this call are aware of that, but a lot of people in this country and around the world don't really think about it. Their food comes in a package at the grocery store, but there's a lot of stuff that gets baked into the creation of those food products. And so to just take a strawberry that maybe molded in the refrigerator and throw it away and put it in the garbage, you end the cycle. It's a line, and that line has an end. But if you can take that strawberry and you give it a new life, then all of these processes that lead to that generation of food waste, all of those issues get addressed and mitigated. So there's the point being is that when we throw food, like when I see a picture of a landfill and there's organic material all in there, and think about the life of an animal too. We just had to throw away 5 pallets of ground beef that went bad from a local distributor, and those are all animals' lives, body parts that are just going into the garbage. So there's a lot that goes into the generation of food. So the EPA takes a very strong interest in wasted food, and they've got a lot of statistics, a lot of research that goes into understanding this whole issue. So they've called it was food waste because we're trying to retool that to think of food waste, food scraps, food as a resource. So they've kind of coined it now wasted food. So that's technically the technical term. So this is, you know, many of us, I'm sure, are familiar with this picture on the left-hand side. And if we just take a second to look at this picture, how many of the items in there could you actually have eaten? So there's going to be some food scraps, no matter what. You're not going to eat a banana peel unless you're super hardcore. I got shamed into eating an apple core once because it was waste. So there's definitely some reductions that can be done, and there's packaging in that picture too, which, you know, we can get into a whole nother conversation. So when that food waste ends up in a landfill, it gets buried, and as things get buried, they're still going to break down, they're still going to decompose, but they're decomposing under anaerobic conditions. And when organic material decomposes under those conditions, it creates methane, and methane is one of the most potent, is more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas emission. But there's all kinds of other issues. We're taking up landfill space. We're going to talk about how much of the landfill is made up of with food scraps. And if anybody maybe wants a few seconds to just chime in in the chat, if you have a guess by percentage, how much of our waste stream is in the North Country specifically is organic material. I'm curious to know what people think about that. But there's a capacity issue. There's water. There's all kinds of other issues more than just methane. So here are some statistics from the EPA, and I'm going to talk to you about the Development Authority of the North Country, which hopefully lots of you are familiar with in Rodman. They have just done a waste characterization study, so we have actual data for what's happening up here. But 6.1% of all U.S. GHG emissions, 22% of freshwater use, 16% of cropland use, and 24% of landfill inputs. This is all related to food waste. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity, again, on the reduction side of things, but also on the soil health generation side of it. This is this was an early version of this. I believe they just finalized their actual data, but again, the Development Authority of the North Country is extremely interested in this issue. And I'm going to make the first plug now, and I'm going to make it again at the end. We are actively seeking a entrepreneur, a farmer, somebody in the western side of what we call our territory, but this would be Jefferson, Western St. Lawrence County, and Lewis counties. We're looking for entrepreneurs who are interested in launching a community scale composting business, or if you're already doing it bigger, better. We're able to support that entity, and there's kind of a little bit of a black hole up there. So we have a pretty nice network over here called the North Country Composters Coalition, Community Composters Coalition. We'd love to add an entity there. DANC is actively looking for that person. So, or people, just my first plug, there'll be another one. And so this is a characterization study for theirs. And so what they came up with is that food waste and municipal solid waste is between 20 to 24%, but in the updated version that we just heard from them, I think it's closer to 40. So it's not a small amount. And if anybody has ever thrown their food waste in their garbage, you know it's gross and stinky, and it's runs, and it's, you know, bad things happen. So there's a better way than just the linear throwing it away. And so the EPA has created this, it used to be a pyramid, but they just changed it. So it's more of like a little loop-de-doop. And the whole point being, if anybody's familiar with clean energy too, is that we want to reduce the waste in the first place. That's the most impactful and powerful thing that you can do. And there's all kinds of ways that can be done, whether it's at your own household level or all the way up through if you're a grocery store, if you're a restaurant, and there's tons of resources to support that. So if you, anything that I talk about today, my contact information will be up there. I am one of a growing network of state, local, regional, federal entities that are here to hold hands and walk through all of these processes. So please reach out. Donating or upcycling is another opportunity from there. So there's a lot of, it's complicated, but it's also not that complicated, but there are some ways to form relationships with food pantries. We have one in Plattsburgh that has an incredible relationship with local farmers. So whenever they have excess, it ends up at the pantry. That's a tiny little example of how that can happen. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. Feeding animals or livestock is another thing. A lot of grocery stores actually have relationships with farmers where they'll set aside their food scraps, breweries too, a lot of brewery grain. I'll share that the challenge here isn't the availability of material, the challenge is the distribution, which is something that we're working on. So Lauren Talbert is in the room, yay. Hi, Lauren. She's probably not in yet, but now she is. Composting or anaerobic digestion. So even though we'd love to see it way up at the front, it's because we love it, that's further down the pipe. So that's something that we do once we've done all of these other steps. Anaerobic digestion, if you're not familiar with it, is the process of processing organic material into end products under controlled conditions. We talked about anaerobic decomposition ending up in methane, and in this situation, they capture the methane and they can turn it into electricity or heat. There are byproducts, there is an effluent, and then there's a digestate that comes out of it. It's really important to note that these are two very different processes, and they create two very different end products. Compost for good, we're compost for good. We believe biasedly in the power of compost, and there's all kinds of reasons related to why that is. And I have a little bar covering some of my right-hand slides, but I believe then it goes down into disposal and then landfilling, of course, being not even in the green. So these are all different opportunities to process and manage scraps. And we, again, my business is called River Valley Regeneratives, regeneration. So we're always trying to close circles. That's always our goal. How can we keep those circles as tight and as close as we possibly can? That's also regional as well as conceptual. So these circles here are how tight we can make those circles depending on what we do. You may or may not know this, but there currently is a law on the books in New York State called the New York State Food Donation and Food Recycling Law. It was adopted in 2019. Currently, if you generate greater than 2 tons of food scraps, food waste a week, you must either donate it or recycle it if you are within 25, 50. Oh gosh, they just changed it. I think it was 50 then, maybe it's, anyway, you have to be within a certain number of miles of an entity that can handle these things. So the state generates this list. It's called the large quantity generator list, and they basically are obligated to participate in it. The law has been, it has passed both the House and Senate, that there are some amendments, edits that had been made to it to drop the weekly tonnage and to change the geography. That's why I think it's maybe 25. So the to meet the state's goals. It is held up at the governor's office. We're not 100% sure why. We've heard she's getting some feedback against it. So we're anxiously waiting for that whole thing to change. So this is just a little bit more about what that means. So we said large quantity generators. That's the buzzword for those terms. It tends to be universities, grocery stores, malls. We have one restaurant, my business, that fell under the guidelines. So yeah, so once this limit drops, we envision a lot more restaurants are going to be obligated. And so the Compost for Good, you know, our goal is that simultaneously we've got this law going on, we've got this issue that's really big. We are really out here, and Dank is Clarkson, you know, we have this really broad range of partnerships that are growing all the time. So the goal is to develop the network of entities that can handle these materials. And community scale from our point of view is lovely because it's distributed and it's vital. There's a group of us that work together. We work closely together. We share resources. We share regions, and we believe in the network concept. I'm going to buzz through a couple of these because it's just more deeper dives on some of the things that we talked about. But we talked about recovery. There's all kinds of resources, and if you're interested in hearing more about that, the state also has an entity called the Center for Ecotechnology, who is been contracted by New York State to support a lot of these things. And there's some great things going on at Fort Drum too. I'll share that too as well. This I've talked about, but this is a visual representation again of the circle. This is why community scale composting is such an important thing. And my compost goes to farmers, it goes to my neighbors, it goes to my farm. I also grow and sell vegetables, so it's a tight little loop for sure. Again, some more deeper dives into some of the concepts that we talked about. So we believe farmer prosperity. There's less need for external inputs. Carbon sequestration, this used to be, as of even 2 years ago, this was theory, and it is now proven that soils treated with compost have a greater capacity to sequester carbon. So we're mitigating emissions and capturing carbon all in the same process, which we love. And if my partner John Culpable were here, he would be talking about microscopy in the soil biome. It is a massively fascinating universe that goes on that we can't see beneath the soil that we all completely are dependent upon to live, period. So if you ever want to geek out on microscopy, please let me know. So I keep looking at my watch because 20 minutes flies really fast. So this is just, again, a visual image of the circle of what these are examples. This is Laura Cook up in Malone. She's a farmer. She accepts food scraps. So she's a part of our network. So I want to buzz through just to give you a snapshot of what's going on in the North Country. Again, we always want to see this grow. Red dots are municipalities, blue dots are schools, universities, green dots are third-party haulers and composters, and orange is other. So this is the network that we are supporting, and municipalities might be, they might have a food scrap drop-off, they might have an actual composting facility themselves. This is generally our territory that we support. Again, I always wanted to go more south, and definitely wanted to go a little bit more down along the Lake Champlain corridor. So this is just a breakdown of what that looks like. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Municipalities, these are different projects that are going on there. Super exciting. It grows all the time. Every day we hear from somebody new. Third-party compost haulers, composters and haulers. Also trying to build this out. Like I said, we want to fill that gap over there along the St. Lawrence River down to Watertown. Whoever you think it is. So here are some pictures. Wellesley Island just adopted. This is a neighborhood scale system that Compost for Good has designed. Super simple, very effective, very scalable. Happy to talk to you about what that might look like. They couldn't be happier. Those are 4 foot high by 4 foot wide repurposed drum culverts, basically. Reber Rock is a farm. They do butcher waste. So we talked about how animal mortalities. We've got Witten Family Farm down on the right, who just built this incredible 5-bay aerated static pile composting system. Ben Weaver Farm up in the right, Horse Farm. He's using, that's also a system that we designed. We're not selling these things, by the way. We just designed the materials and the concepts and help people. And that's my business down to the left. We have what's called a windrow turner, which is like a big fat rototiller. So some of the customers that we service, this is our network. So we've got Lake Placid Pub and Brewery. We take their grains and their food, Small Town Cultures. We get their spent grains. Bottom right-hand corner is my partner. He designed and built that drum composter. So we've got some manufacturers there's a lot of demand for small scale composting equipment. We're hoping to build that out. These are all customers otherwise of food scraps. It can go from the bucket to the, my business just bought a box truck with a lift gate. So we process 6 to 7 tons of food scraps a week. Compost for Good also is, we spend a lot of time with supporting community outreach events. We have a community composting liaison program that we just launched in partnership, or wrapped up the first round. Now we're going into the second round. That was with Clarkson University. And we have about 2 seconds before we go into the question and answer side of things. So I just want to point out that this is, it's ideal in terms of the concept of it, but it definitely, there's no lack of challenges to accomplish organics recycling. But again, that's what Compost for Good does, and we meet you where you're at. Some of our people that we support, it's a one-time deal. We have others that we've been in this now for 4 years that have been very closely tied to us for 4 years. We get grants for them. We write grants with them. We celebrate their successes. We help them identify solve their challenges and problems. So I'm going to say this again because this is a really important outcome for us, that we would love to find an entrepreneur out in the western side. And again, I know Lauren joined, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, Lauren, but if you could reach out to me, or if you wanted to speak up publicly and talk about where things are at in Lewis County, and I don't know if Julian's on as well, I'd welcome that, whether it's here or if you want to reach out to me. So just a quick buzz of what this could mean. It could mean that you're a municipality and you're on-site composting. You're a municipality and you have a third-party composter come and collect the food scraps at a drop-off site. I work with 2 communities that have that kind of a relationship. You might subcontract with a third-party hauler, like if you're a municipality, or they just do it all. You can host an education or outreach campaign in your community and your university and your restaurant, whatever that might be. You can promote food waste diversion just as a concept. There's a lot of tools and resources, just like you can support it, promote it. Participating in the Climate Smart Communities program. If you don't know what that is, let me know and I'll make some connections for you. This one here, finding and empowering community composting champions, is, I cannot say enough about that for any project. If once you get that, we all know this person, they find it, they do it, and they latch onto it, and it only succeeds because of them hosting a grant and chipping. If you're a municipality making chips, composters and haulers are and farmers are always looking for wood chips. So again, we're looking for an entrepreneur. This is I don't know if there's going to be a way to share things, but this is a link to a very short video that we had made by Eric Adsit, who's from Lewis County. It's short, but it's really nicely done overview of why food scrap reduction is so super important. And that's it. I'm Jen Perry. Reach out anytime, and I'm happy to take questions. And hopefully I didn't talk too fast. Everybody tells me I talk fast, but it's coffee. I can't slow down.
It is
Hi.
all. We do have a couple of minutes left. Does anyone have any questions?
I have one question.
Go for it.
Yeah. So I take it this is for St. Lawrence County.
Yeah. Oh, which this? The dank part or the compost for good?
Well, the programs that you've been describing, I'm wondering if there are any similar such programs in other counties in the state, or if you're coordinating that way. Just, my thinking, well, I'm in Ulster and Tompkins County, and I'm wondering if you have any resources there, or if they're doing anything that's similar to what you've been describing.
I do. Can you reach out to me? Do you see my email, or did you see my email? Or I think it looks like the slide might have gone away. I can, Taylor, are you able to pop that into the chat? Do you have it while I'm answering questions, or otherwise I can do it? But yeah, absolutely, Brad. Yes.
Okay,
Sure.
great. Thanks.
Yeah.
I will.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Nice.
Awesome.
And I saw Lauren. Lauren, did you want to, unless there's other questions, Lauren, did you want to talk about your grant at all?
We're getting a little short on time, though.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the only thing.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
So, but it does sound like Lewis County is working on getting their pilot program ready. So that is very exciting.
Super exciting.
Okay. Well, sorry to cut this short. This is a great topic. But I want to thank you, Jennifer, very much for your time and your wonderful presentation. It was fantastic. Your email is in the chat. So if anyone has any outstanding questions, please do direct those her way. And next up, we have developing a roadmap for a wood-based bioeconomy in New York State. And our presenter is going to be Danielle Kloster, assistant professor and sustainable resources management at SUNY ESF. Danielle, I'm going to make you co-host so that you can share your screen.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, nice and clear.
Awesome. All right, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks everyone for coming, and good morning. As Taylor mentioned, I'm from SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry in the Sustainable Resources Management Department, and I'm sharing some work that I've been doing with my colleague Tim Volk, who is also faculty here at ESF. And so we've been working on this project to develop a roadmap for a wood-based bioeconomy in New York State. And so I wanted to start out by talking about what is the bioeconomy, because it's a kind of fancy term for something that most of us are already familiar with. So the bioeconomy is essentially just the portion of the economy that uses renewable bio-based feedstocks. So trying to think about, in particular, what are some ways that we can use biological materials rather than fossil fuel-based materials? And so that might mean for building materials, for example, focusing on solid wood, mass timber, using bioplastics or other replacement products that were previously or currently are produced using fossil fuels. And also thinking about bioenergy. So we have a sustainable energy management program for our undergraduates here. So we're also thinking about biofuels, and particularly more advanced biofuels, moving away from corn ethanol and thinking about renewable diesel, some biodiesel, sustainable aviation fuel that are derived from bio-based materials. And so this crosses forestry, agriculture, aquaculture. Our focus here is on woody biomass. And so we are mostly working in the forestry sector with a little bit in agroforestry. So Dr. Volk, my colleague, does work on willow, shrub willow, that is produced in sort of a hybrid forestry agricultural system on a very short-term crop rotation. And so we're looking at that as a feedstock and also forestry residues. And the idea here, or the benefit of a bioeconomy, aside from moving away from fossil fuel-based products and helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce reliance on other states and countries for our materials, this also helps to create local jobs and economic development alongside those climate and environmental benefits. And so we started this research in the context of the Climate Act, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act from 2019, that sets a goal of 40% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and 85% by 2050. And so part of that 85% is that if we want to hit net zero, we need to also have around 60 million metric tons of carbon sequestration per year in our forest, much of that in our forest, not all of it. And so that also is a benefit of the bioeconomy. If we are using forest products, we can ensure that we have active forest management that is promoting carbon sequestration in those forests. And so this is also just building on what some of the priorities are from our state government. In the State of the State address in 2023, Governor Hochul set a progressive bioeconomy development agenda. And what I wanted to emphasize here is that we're trying to leverage existing opportunities. So New York State has a strong bioeconomy, right? We have a strong agricultural sector. We have a strong history of forestry in the state. And so we're not starting from scratch here. We're trying to think about what are the ways that the state is already functioning in this space, and what are some things that we can do to develop this further. And so thinking about what our existing bioeconomy, wood-based bioeconomy in particular, looks like, this is work from our colleague Mariela Cavo, looking at the economics of forest products in the state. And in 2017, they estimate that there were around 40,000 good paying jobs in the state because of forest and wood products industries here. These industries generated more than $13.4 billion of economic output. And then there were also indirect jobs and economic activity that were stemming from the forest and wood products industries. We've had some growth in the amount of economic output in terms of dollar values, but there has been some drop in employment over time. And we're now down to around 35,000 jobs in the sector. So that has been declining, but there is a potential to bring some of that employment in forestry and wood products back to the state in ways that will benefit both the economy and the environment. The scoping plan for the Climate Act has some themes related to the wood-based bioeconomy. So two of the strategies that discuss the wood-based bioeconomy is the promoting sustainable forest management, which would help to increase the amount of carbon that is sequestered in our forests, and promoting a climate-focused bioeconomy, which is what we're kind of focusing on here in this report that we're putting together. So one thing in this scoping plan, and this is getting into kind of the nitty-gritty of the appendices of the scoping plan, so probably many people have not taken a look at those, but there are different scenarios that are laid out in the scoping plan trying to reach the 85% greenhouse gas reduction. And so they've been modeled. If we look at this chart, we have from 2020 to 2050, what is the greenhouse gas emission reduction overall. And you can see the black diamonds on the screen are the emissions limits that we're trying to reach. So the goal of 40% reduction by 2030 and 85% by 2050 are indicated with those diamonds. If we keep business as usual, that's the black line. And if we follow the advisory panel recommendations, that's the blue line. So that gets us close to our goals, but not quite there. And then the scoping plan also lays out these 3 additional scenarios: strategic use of low carbon fuels, accelerated transition away from combustion, and beyond 85% reduction. And we've been kind of focusing on scenario 2. It's likely that the actual reality of what happens will be a combination of these different scenarios. But in scenario 2, there is a big focus on wood-based fuels and using biofuels to be able to transition some of our harder to decarbonize sectors. So things like heavy duty trucking, for example, or replacing jet fuel in airplanes, those are things that are difficult to do with just electrification. And so biomass-based fuels have potentially a big role to play there, and especially these more advanced biofuels. So just looking at one of the appendices to give some context to the scope of the challenge and the scope of what we're trying to accomplish with a wood-based bioeconomy in the state, this is just to supply renewable diesel for the scenario 2 in the scoping plan. So if we're trying to reach those goals following scenario 2, we would need around 1.2 billion gallons per year of renewable diesel. And what that translates to, we did some additional calculations, that would be around 9 million dry tons of agriculture and forest residues and around 6.2 million dry tons of purpose-grown biomass. So if we looked at that in the context of woody fuels, we have an estimated sustainable forest residue supply of around 8 to 12 million dry tons per year, and an estimated willow supply, if we scaled up willow production to places where it's reasonable and possible to do willow production, we would have around 6 to 10 million dry tons. So we can meet these goals, but it would require kind of a shift in how we're currently using our forest residues and also how we're using agricultural land to grow. We would need to transition some of that marginal agricultural land to growing willow or other purpose-grown biomass. And so what we wanted to do in developing this roadmap for the wood-based bioeconomy was to think about what are the stakeholders who are already engaged in the wood-based bioeconomy experiencing, and how do they see the state as being set up for or not a wood-based bioeconomy? What are the things that we would need to do to facilitate this? And so we performed a SWOT analysis over a series of focus groups. I'll talk about the different groups in a moment. But our SWOT analysis, we looked at the strengths, what are the resources, assets, and advantages for New York State that could contribute to a wood-based bioeconomy, some of the weaknesses that might distract from a wood-based bioeconomy, things that the state is lacking or areas for improvement, opportunities, how the resources in the state could be used to support a wood-based bioeconomy, or things that the state could be doing that it's not currently, and then any threats, obstacles that were foreseen for the wood-based bioeconomy in New York State, both from within the state and from outside. And so we gathered stakeholders primarily from New York State, but we did have a couple of folks from other places that had experience in the wood-based bioeconomy, or that have companies that are interested in potentially coming to New York to work in the bioeconomy. And so we had 4 different groups, one focused on policy, markets, and finance, one on biomass feedstocks, one on environmental conservation, and the last on biotechnology. And so across these 4 groups, we had a total of 27 participants contributing. So I wanted to share some of the themes that came out related to the wood-based bioeconomy in New York State. Some of the strengths that were identified by our participants are resource availability. New York State is very heavily forested. We have a really good growth rate relative to harvest, which means that there's a lot of opportunity to sustainably increase the amount that we're harvesting from our forest without compromising the integrity of the forest. We have really good hardwood species that are potentially valuable for some of these applications. And we have a lot of marginal land that is available potentially for afforestation, reforestation, or short rotation woody crops. So being able to increase the amount of forest land or land that's producing these short rotation woody crops like willow. We also have good markets in place. We have a high population density. We're in a cold climate, so there's demand for heating fuels. There's lots of opportunity to grow where we're actually selling these products. We have the infrastructure for the most part in place. As a state, we have a strong history in logging and milling. And so even though some of those facilities have closed in recent years, there is an opportunity to revitalize some of that industry to serve the purposes of the wood-based bioeconomy. And there's also a strong cultural history. We heard that especially from folks in Western New York and Northern New York, that there is a lot of support for bringing back more active forest management in the state and supporting some of those industries. The Climate Act indicates that there's political will here, and there's potentially funding and more opportunity for new and revised policies. So we're kind of standing on the precipice, right, of making a lot of changes in the state. And so there's an opportunity here for us to really proactively develop a wood-based bioeconomy that helps us to transition away from fossil fuels in a way that benefits both the local economy and our state's environment. And we also have a strong educational institution economy or community. So we have ESF in the state. We have Cornell working on a lot of these agricultural questions, Paul Smith's, and many more institutions. These are the ones that kind of came up in the focus groups, but we have a lot of great colleges around the state that can help with workforce development and that can work on research partnerships to make sure that we're doing this in a sustainable way. Some of the weaknesses and threats that our participants identified in New York State that might be challenges or barriers to a wood-based bioeconomy. One was that biomass in the Climate Act is a little bit unclear, the role of biomass. So the Climate Act generally moves away from combustion. And so that means wood for heating, wood for electricity production are probably not opportunities that are currently laid out in the scoping plan. And that means that there is also concerns about what's going to happen in the future, both from a funding perspective, but also from a policy perspective. Some of our biotechnology companies that we talked to said that they were concerned that if they came and built a facility in New York State, that in the future there might be more opposition to using biomass for different purposes, like biochar, like renewable diesel. And so they were a little hesitant to start investing in New York State when it was unclear how biomass would be treated in the future. There's also some misinformation and misunderstanding that our participants perceived among both policymakers and the general public. The Climate Act generally equates biogenic carbon, which is the carbon that's released when we combust woody fuels or biofuels, with conflating that with fossil carbon. And so we always try to make the point that biogenic carbon is on a shorter time rotation. So it is carbon that was taken up in the very recent past and now is being emitted as we burn wood pellets, wood chips, chunk wood, or renewable diesel that was derived from woody materials, for example. But if we are practicing these activities within a sustainable harvesting framework, then that carbon is then going to be taken up pretty quickly again. And so on these short rotations, we can do this in a way that is going to be either net carbon neutral or very low carbon compared to fossil fuels, which have taken up carbon 300 million years ago, for example. Carbon was taken up by these plants. Now they've decomposed into oil over the course of millions of years of heat and pressure. And so we're releasing all of that carbon very quickly now, and there's not really a cycle in place to take that carbon back up. So there's a difference there between biogenic and fossil carbon, and we want to make sure that people are aware of that. There's also some misinformation or misunderstanding potentially around wood as a renewable resource. So sometimes there's a concern that if we are using wood for building materials, for example, that will lead to depletion of our forests. And that's certainly a possibility if we're not doing this well, but there is definitely an opportunity, especially here in New York State, for sustainable harvesting and ensuring that we're protecting the resource of the forest while also getting those usable materials out of it. And then there's also just a lack of information around how many jobs and economic development that could be generated from engaging more in the wood-based bioeconomy. Another challenge that folks identified was a lack of markets for low-grade wood products, and having markets for low-grade wood products allows people to do more active forest management on their land, having someplace that low-grade material can be sent. And in the past, that has been pulp mills, but those have declined in the state. We have very few, only 2 or 3 pulp mills left in the state at this point. We've also had our wood energy plants closed. So those were previously also markets for low-grade material, and that's a concern for future investors. So trying to think about where they would send low-grade material that they can't use for some of the other applications leads to concern about how they would have a sustainable business model. And then finally, we do want to make sure that we're maintaining our forest resource, right? So we're losing some forests to renewable energy. There's also concerns about deer overpopulation and invasive species that help to limit regeneration of our forests. We also in New York have small and fragmented land holdings, and so it's difficult to do forest management on a large scale here in New York State in many areas. So ending on a more positive note, what are some of the opportunities or things that the state could be doing to promote a wood-based bioeconomy if that's where we want to go? One of these is expanding some of the tax and easement programs with a focus on keeping forest as forest. I think we really want to emphasize that in promoting a wood-based bioeconomy. We're not looking to reduce the amount of forest land in the state. We're trying to think about how can we keep our forest as healthy managed forests, working forests, as they might be called in some parts of the country. Rebates for efficient wood stoves. These are things that used to be in place that are no longer in place and that our participants were really interested in potentially bringing back. Reforming or expanding 480A, the tax program for forest landowners, to help promote more climate smart forestry, carbon management in forests, and potentially providing incentives for promoting biodiversity, for example, or other environmental benefits of forests beyond just keeping forest as forest and promoting harvesting. And then also providing some incentives for small landowners that otherwise might not be included in some of those tax programs. There's also a need to educate decision makers, especially around this idea of wood as a renewable resource and thinking about places where the wood-based bioeconomy aligns with environmental and environmental justice interests within the state. We want to or the participants really indicated a need for creating networks and synergies. So developing knowledge sharing networks and also finding ways to feedstock opportunities for a lot of these companies. They saw an opportunity to kind of partner with other companies where a waste from one process could become a feedstock in another process. Developing consistent greenhouse gas emission accounting was really important to especially the startups and companies that we were talking to make it possible for them to do operations in New York State that is comparable to what they're doing in other states, keeping that accounting really simple and also aligning with the IPCC. And then finally, there was interest in the state creating and supporting markets. So using government procurement or long-term contracts through the state to help to bring more uptake of some of these products. So things like renewable diesel, for example, or mass timber, kind of using the state as a guinea pig or an example of how some of these products could work, and helping to find private investment that can align with climate commitments. So large companies that are trying to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, trying to think about how we can partner with them to promote the wood-based bioeconomy in that reduction. All right, so I'll wrap up there. Thank you for your time. Our contact information is on the slide if you have any questions that we're not able to get to, but I will also try to check the chat. And actually, Taylor, I don't see the chat. Are there any questions in there?
I don't see any questions in the chat at this time, but if anyone has any questions or even just some discussion, please do feel free to raise your hand or even just unmute yourself. We've got a few minutes left, so make the most of this time. I will say, even just to get maybe some chat started, that I've been looking into a lot of historic lumber businesses, and there's a lot of interest in how the communities were built up around that. And it does seem like over time we have lost some of that diversity in the forestry industry, at least up here. And I know that's something that a lot of people are a little worried about. But I mean, you finish with, it's always nice to finish with opportunities. So it does make you feel a little bit better. Oh, here's a question. Does burning wood or pellets for heating contribute to greenhouse gases?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Marianne. And I think that's where we want to be thinking about this difference between fossil and biogenic carbon. So at the point of combustion, there's going to be greenhouse gases from wood pellets and wood chips, or chunk wood if that's what you're using in your stoves. But that carbon that's being released, so yes, it's contributing to greenhouse gases, it's contributing to climate change potentially, but that carbon was taken up by those trees in the very recent past, probably the last 20 years. And as long as we have that in a system of continued sustainable management of our forests, sustainable harvesting, we anticipate that those trees are going to regrow. And so it's on a shorter time cycle than fossil carbon, where that carbon was taken up from the atmosphere 300 million years ago and is now suddenly being released very quickly. So it really depends on the sustainable harvesting, right? As long as we have sustainable harvesting, we generally consider wood or biogenic carbon to be a more low carbon or net zero carbon resource. And potentially in some systems, a negative carbon emissions system, because the roots of trees and woody crops will take up carbon and store that carbon in the soil. And so there can be, over the long term, some actual net sequestration of carbon. Mickey, did you have a question?
Are we Mickey? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
What about byproduct from the timber industry? Is that being, I apologize if you brought that up, but is that something that is being used first? Is all the sawdust that's made, whether through manufacturing or building of homes, modular homes, certainly?
Yes, definitely. So that's a lot of that material ends up getting used at the facility where it's generated. So they'll use that for heating, for example, of their facilities. But that can also be one of those low-grade wood products. And so we don't currently have a lot of places in the state to send that low-grade material, but there is potential for that material to be used for producing biochar, or using it in renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel production. So there's lots of opportunity in the wood-based bioeconomy. And that would be one of the focuses, is really looking at those waste products of other production mechanisms to make sure that we're using those materials in the bioeconomy.
So would that be the same as landscapers, tree removers? So many times, everything, the brush, chips, that's what my colleague here is saying, the chips, they go nowhere.
Right.
Perfect trees, that it's just a waste.
Yeah.
So is that, it's hard to collect that now and transport it, I imagine?
Yeah, and one of the challenges right now is that there's not really anywhere to take it besides the landfill. There was the Black River energy plant on Fort Drum had been taking some of that material for that region, and other wood energy facilities could take that material, that chipped material. But right now we don't really have a whole lot of opportunity to take it anywhere. So it ends up getting mostly either landfilled or just chipped and put somewhere. Sometimes composted.
But is that one of the boxes that needs to be, is that one of the weaknesses that you referred to? I mean, that's something to me, if there was a means of collecting it and transporting it, it's a no-brainer. The product is already there, but thank you very much.
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
interesting.
Thanks, Mickey.
So we
We-
are out of time at this point. I did post Danielle's email address into the chat. If you have any other outstanding questions remaining, please do send those along. Danielle, thank you so much for your time and presentation today.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. And we are set to take a 15-minute break from 10:30 to 10:45. And
Wait,
then
we have one more question.
Oh,
Could we do that one more question, please?
real quickly.
Okay, these renewable, quick-growing forests you're talking about, are we doing monoculture here in large plots?
Yeah, so the willow typically is grown as a mixture of different cultivars. So they tend to have pretty good biodiversity. We have some research, actually, if you look up Tim Volk's research, you can see some of the biodiversity work that they've done around it. So it is technically a monoculture in the sense that it's all willow, but it's usually a group of different cultivars that have different, some slightly different properties and attract some slightly different species to them. So they have some soil erosion benefits. They're not going to be tilled each year, for example. So once they're installed, they're there for 20 to 25 years. So there's some other environmental benefits that come from the willow. And they generally are not huge plots, not like what you would see out in the Midwest, for example, with corn plots.
I didn't hear willow in the big area.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. Once again, Danielle, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate it. We will be taking a short break and reconvening at 10:45.
Great for anything else
See you
other
shortly,
than
everyone.
Beautiful tree. And
Thanks, Taylor.
I'm going to do a different one here, I think.
Yes, I know. Hello, moderator. Who is that? Do we know who that is? She was just there. Taylor,
Ready to go for 10:45.
did I mute?
They might be done, they may have.
But they should keep this,
The chat.
going, yeah, because, yeah,
Does the chat get recorded when the second gets recorded?
it's supposed to, but who knows? It can, you can save it, but it's gotta be with it. Okay. Yeah, we keep moving, which is fun. And who's my colleague here? I just want to laugh because I do that too. I'm too lazy to cut the damn bagel and I just slather it on top. It's just, what's the difference, right? It's the difference of deep dish pizza and thin slice. That's all it is.
Recreation and tourism, what I want to go see next.
Okay, which one?
If that's possible.
Recreation and tourism, that. So let's see who's planning to do what, because one of the. Well, I was thinking we might be able to separate the two again, and we only have two sessions that are running. So it's not
I would
nearly.
like orange or purple.
One of those.
Recreation, if they're playing.
This is this one.
Okay, as long as this will stay then
Yeah,
we'll
this one.
leave it here. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll get my stuff to go to the bathroom.
Can't tell them this. If I have to. I was gonna say, I still.
Okay, we're good. So we got.
This was here this morning.
We're gonna have a board.
Twice.
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Switch over to that. So we gotta go and remember something this back.
Left.
And this one we must be on the right way. So it's gonna be.
Right, good.
And we should have brought. Like, phone. Like here, like here. Let's talk about that. Clear. Well, so whatever you probably will go back. I was just wondering for things, just looking about that and spread them out a little bit.
I'm not, to the next, and it's like the whole rest.
Okay, was that one after lunch?
I think it's the one right.
Right before lunch. Okay.
Okay, Danny, I just wanted to let you know that I have made you co-host so that you can get your presentation loaded up and you should be able to share your screen. Let me know if there's any issues with that.
Let me see if I can share it. Um, Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it just fine.
Okay, so my plan is to advance the slides. Stefan's gonna start up the presentation and then I'll fill in.
Okay, I will be keeping an eye on the chat and admitting anyone who might walk in late, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
All right, and got about 30 seconds, so take that time and then take it away as soon as you'd like.
Ready when you are, Stefan.
Sure. Danny, feel free to chime in if I forget anything at any point or you have something to add. But in the meantime, we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Stefan Luter. I'm here with my colleague, Danny Lapin. We are project managers and planners with the Department of State. The two of us primarily work in sort of the Mohawk Valley region, and we help with various projects, including DRI, New York Forward, the Smart Growth Community Planning and Zoning Program, and the Brentford. Today, we're going to concentrate mostly on the New York Forward program and sort of by extension, the DRI program, which is sort of sister projects that are very similar. So we'll talk a little bit about those programs generally, and then we'll sort of talk about the ongoing Boonville New York Forward project, which is underway right now. They applied to the program last year, and they're going to finish up their strategic plan this fall and be undergoing implementation over the next few years. So Danny will talk a little bit about that process, how it's been going up until now, including the application and the planning process that's currently underway there, and sort of the outlook for that project in Boonville. Next slide. So the DRI and New York Forward programs, the DRI has been going. We're open right now for round 8. Round 7 is currently in the planning stage. So it's been around for a while now. New York Forward is really its second round of planning. These two programs strive to create active downtowns with a strong sense of place and a robust mix of uses that support and attract a diverse population of residents, workers, and visitors. It's really, both projects were conceived in an attempt to revitalize sort of existing New York downtowns. When you think of DRI, originally, a lot of the original program applicants were places like Utica, Syracuse, or Watertown. New York Forward was created to sort of address a little bit smaller communities that have really similar needs, just at a slightly smaller scale, and might not have quite the need or investment potential of a $10 million award. So DRI communities typically represent larger geographical areas, have sort of a bigger regional draw, are major employment centers, a little bit more of an urban landscape, maybe have public transportation, a bike network, things like that. New York Forward communities tend to be a little bit smaller, but still with a concentrated node or corridor. Just think of a traditional Main Street or something like that. And maybe have a little bit less of a density, but are still compact, walkable, and have a really distinct sense of place. And Boonville is really a great example of sort of a New York forward community. Next slide. So as I said, we are currently open for applications for round 8 of DRI and round 3 of New York Forward. The DRI is $100 million across 10 communities, 1 in each REDC region. The New York Forward program is also $100 million across the state and awards 2 different communities in each REDC region, each receiving $4.5 million awards. So again, that's essentially 3 communities in each REDC region that are receiving this investment. Currently, I should note that the applications close, I believe, on October 18th, and typically, this is a yearly cycle. Typically, the application opens in late summer and is open through mid-fall or so. Next slide, Danny. So what are we trying to accomplish with the DRI and New York Forward programs? Well, we want to create an active downtown where there's a lot going on. People want to spend time there, shop, do community activities, maybe see music or get food or go to a public event. We want to attract new businesses, particularly in that same downtown area, that are walkable and engaging and offer sort of a reinvestment in the community. We want to enhance existing or create new public spaces, build a diverse population. A lot of the focus, we have a strong focus across the state right now on adding housing, which is a critical issue. And these programs often end up funding at least some of the funding goes towards some kind of housing component. And maybe it's a mixed use building that's adding, rehabbing a couple stories into apartments. Or maybe it's a new construction housing development. But usually there's some component of adding housing to the community. We want to grow the local property tax base. We use this investment to expand the local property tax base and enhance the financial stability of the community. We want to provide general quality of life amenities and improvements. Again, thinking about those public spaces, equitable, well-planned public spaces that are really engaging for the community, accessibility to needs like groceries or work. That's a big component of what we're thinking about. And we also want to use the program to address sort of the climate crisis more broadly and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So the New York Forward planning process, obviously outside of this planning process, there's also an application process. So the communities, this is after the communities apply. So once they're accepted as a New York Forward community, they start an 8 or 9 month planning process where they begin with a visioning process to refine the community's vision for their downtown and establish priorities, goals, and strategies to achieve that vision, and get a lot of public input on that vision and strategies. They assess sort of the opportunities and challenges facing the communities downtown and understand the unique to the community characteristics that impact how the downtown will change over the coming years and how it has gotten to where it is today. And they identify key opportunities for investment. After that, and sort of ongoing through the process, really, you have project development and evaluation where the local planning committee will identify, develop, and evaluate potential projects for investment. So this is sort of the meat of that $4.5 million award. This is where you're determining what projects get a piece of that $4.5 million award, whether that's enhancing a park or a new mixed-use building or the complete revitalization of a historic property, something along those lines. This is an ongoing process to sort of vet and determine the scope and award amount of those projects. And at the end, the community recommends projects for funding to the state that align with the community's goals. And typically the community will represent, in New York Forward community, the award is $4.5 million. Typically the community will recommend projects that total more than that amount, something like, let's say, $6 or $7 million, so that there's a little bit of a backstop if one of those projects falls to the side. There's a ready-made project to fill in that gap. So each community is led by a consultant team to do this, to guide the planning process, develop projects to recommend to the state, and create a strategic investment plan. And the Department of State obviously oversees this. Danny or myself, for instance, in the Mohawk Valley, oversee the development of this strategic plan. And the process really is aimed at being locally driven, not just by the locally determined planning committee, but with a strong emphasis given on public engagement and opportunity for the public to weigh in, not just on the visioning process and sort of the goals of the downtown and strategic plan, but also the projects themselves, what the scope of those projects are, which projects sort of float to the top as a priority for the public, and so on. Next slide. So I'll hand it over to Danny to talk about how this comes into play in Boonville.
All right, thank you, Stefan. I'm Danny Lapin. I'm Stefan's counterpart in the Mohawk Valley. It's great to work with such a like-minded planner, and I've been really enjoying working with the Village of Boonville on this exciting project. I'm sure many of you know about Boonville or have been there, or spent time there, maybe even have family there. But in the event that some of you aren't from Boonville or may not be familiar with the community, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the community. This is a very high-level assessment, so forgive my brevity. The Village of Boonville is located in northern Oneida County, right on the border of the Adirondack Park, and is about a 35-minute drive from the city of Utica, and it's about 2 hours from where I am in Oneonta, New York. As of the 2020 census, the village has about 2,000 people, whereas the town has about 4,500 people, giving the greater Boonville community total population of about 6,500, which makes it kind of one of the larger combined village and towns, kind of in our region. So Boonville is famous for two large events, which collectively bring almost 100,000 people to the village of Boonville per year. The first being the Woodsman's Field Days, which is established in 1962. And the second event, which has been going on since 1888, is the Oneida County Boonville Fair. And as you can see below, these are two large events that really create a unique identity and sense of place in Boonville. But it's not it doesn't really define Boonville as a whole, but it really does put Boonville front and center in the minds of many, many residents in the Mohawk Valley. So in terms of Boonville's application, so as Stefan kind of mentioned, the New York Forward application needs to concentrate on kind of what we collectively define as a traditional village or town center or a city downtown. the group that comprised Boonville's New York Forward application focused on that kind of core Main Street area on one spine, and the other spine being Schuyler Street, just outside of Tractor Supply. They initially introduced the possibility of 8 projects, ranging from, the reconstruction of the Boone building, which was destroyed by fire in 2020, to and the redoing of the lodging kit company facility that used to be the former home of the Delta Hardwood facility and the former Ethan Allen plant. They had a number of wayfinding projects that they were interested in doing on Main Street to make the village a much more inviting and attractive streetscape for people visiting from Woodsman's Field Days and or the fair. There was interest in kind of activating the kind of western edge of the village with Flower Hill Farm, which has a tremendous social media following and provides, beautiful plants and flowers for, that attract people from miles and miles around. So they kind of, envisioned their downtown on that kind of 2-spine axis to really get people to gather and stay in the heart of Boonville. And that's kind of what, in part motivated the Regional Economic Development Council to select Boonville as a New York Forward Award winner. And I will get more into the specific reasons underlying their award in just a little bit. So Boonville, the Village of Boonville partnered with Mohawk Valley Edge, which is a tremendous technical assistance provider that serves kind of, Oneida County and their immediate surroundings. Through a robust public engagement process, the village, and its community kind of created a vision that focused really on what comprises a vibrant downtown. So when you think of a vibrant downtown, you think of pedestrian-friendly infrastructure. You think of small businesses that are open consistently and offer things that people want to buy. You think about activated green spaces and parks that feature, key, cultural amenities that make Boonville unique, such as kind of Santa's house in the heart of the village and, the original bandstand from many, many years ago, which is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places, I believe, or State Register, I should say. Boonville's downtown, the public wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing with landscaping and streetscape amenities that make, people want to go out and walk and get out of their car and, feel like they're in a kind of bustling, vibrant village. They wanted to revive some of the building facades that maybe have seen, better days, but are still owned and cared for by people who are really committed to seeing Boonville be successful. They wanted to give successful small businesses the opportunity to expand and attract and employ new people and attract new visitors. They wanted places like Awesome Country to kind of continue their forward momentum and expand. And of course, they wanted to create jobs, hence the reconstruction of the Boone building and the kind of proposed expansion of the lodging kit company, which would collectively create dozens of jobs right in the heart of Boonville. So Boonville's vision kind of focused on 7 key, I guess I should say 6 key planning themes that kind of collectively encapsulated what I just went over. And through the creation of thoughtful goals and objectives, the village and now the state are confident that Boonville will be collectively able to effectuate this vision over the course of their planning process. So, I think many of you in the audience know that, Boonville is basically a story of resilience, right? They had a vibrant kind of village core, maybe 10 years ago, in a kind of cohesive downtown streetscape. They had large employment and, over the course of the pandemic and kind of economic downturn as a result of globalization, they fell on some kind of hard times. The pandemic coupled with the fire in 2020 really, damaged the downtown. But Boonville just got themselves right back up, and through their incredible dedication and hard work, they were able to generate tremendous positive momentum that allowed them to be not only competitive for the New York Forward application, but to present the Mohawk Valley Regional Economic Development Council with one of the most competitive applications that they've seen in quite some time. So to put this into perspective, between 2021 and 2024, approximately $4.5 million were invested in the former Delta Hardwood facility by the Lodging Kit Company. This comprises private funds from the company itself, but also a Restore New York award of 2 million. And then additional funding from, the village, and additional grant funding from the EPA to do an environmental site assessment of this facility. But all told, once complete, we anticipate, the facility being able to create, dozens of new jobs right in the village that pay well and will dramatically improve the quality of life in the community. From the public side, the village is incredibly dedicated with regard to improving and expanding its public infrastructure. In 2016, the village was awarded a $1.1 million funding to do a $1.1 million storm sewer system improvement project. And in between 2024 and 2026, we estimate that about the New York State Department of Transportation will invest about $6.8 million in a public safety project along Route 12. And for those of you who've been to Boonville, you'll see that Boonville has two primary entry points off Route 12, both intersections of which kind of promote fast-moving traffic and really don't attract people to downtown. And then on top of that, there's a public safety concern because the alignment of those intersections make it difficult to see where people are going, which is a concern because Irwin Park is right across the street from the downtown core. And it really makes it hazardous to kind of walk across the street and take advantage of the park and then go from the park and go downtown to get something to eat or stay somewhere. So when you think about, all those investment projects comprising kind of public and private sources, between over the last 20 years, Boonville has generated about $21 million in investment, and this is being relatively conservative. So again, it's a testament to the community's resilience and their hard work as a village and greater community. So, sometimes when people see a lot of state investment or a lot of public investment, they say, well, what about, the private sector? Is the private sector meeting us halfway? And we can unequivocally say in Boonville that the private sector is doing more than that. As you can see from the Villages New York Forward application, you see numerous small businesses ranging from Awesome Country to the Woodland Farm Brewery to the Lake Effect Tech, the Black Woman's Blueprint, Flower Hill Farm, Broadway Cafe and Bakery, contributing millions of dollars in private investment and creating, dozens of jobs. And this is exactly what we want to see in a competitive New York Forward community. We want to see, the village, the community rising to the challenge, from the government side, but also the private sector buying fully into the community's vision for growth and revitalization. And in Boonville, you had those two kind of pushes meet nicely in the middle to create, a competitive New York Forward application and a very strong and robust planning process. So, as kind of Stefan alluded to, now that they got the award and they have all this momentum, you might ask, well, what are they going to do? So the state kind of provides the guardrails for, a New York Forward community or a DRI community to basically create a bottom-up planning process. This planning process is basically chaired by, the chief executive of the community. In this case, it's Mayor Della from Boonville, and a member of the Mohawk Valley Regional Economic Development Council with expertise in the region. And that would be Dr. Laura Casamento, who's the former president of Utica College and is now on the REDC board. The local planning committee also includes numerous people from the community of all different backgrounds. You have people who are former mayors, you have people who work as contractors, you have nurse practitioners, you have teachers, you have basically anyone with a vested stake in Boonville who is interested in the New York Forward program can be put forward as a local planning committee member. The local planning committee member provides the foundational direction on the planning effort to both the consultant team and the state. Our project consultant is led by the LaBerge Group out of Colony, just outside of Albany, and they're supported by a team of subcontractors with a wide-ranging expertise, ranging from real estate economics to civil engineering to graphic design and public engagement, environmental planning, and more. They basically assist with the compilation of the strategic investment plan and with the, refinement of the projects that the community identifies. At the state level, as Stefan said, the planning process is led by the Department of State, myself and Stefan, and we're supported by our sister agencies, Empire State Development and the New York State Office of Homes and Community Renewal. We lead the planning process and manage the consultants, and we also review the proposed projects with the governor eventually selecting those that receive an award, usually the following year, or ideally later this year. It's important to note that the state doesn't control the community. We don't dictate to them what projects they can and can't fund. We do have programmatic guidelines, but we really do give the community broad latitude in identifying projects that they believe can collectively revitalize their community. So in terms of where we are, each LPC meeting or each stage of the New York Forward planning process could be, covered in a 1-hour webinar. And given that we only have a few minutes to talk to you today, I'm going to give you a very brief highlights of where Boonville is. So in terms of local planning committee meetings, we're right about just over halfway. We've identified numerous projects for the local planning committee to review. There was an open call for projects released, because again, it's one thing to have projects in your application, but that all leaves, business owners and other people who might have a project that they want to put forward. So there was a robust open call for projects process. There was extensive community outreach that has been completed. And we've had 1 out of 2 public workshops complete, and with the overall goal of, identifying and refining competitive projects that are worthy of New York Forward funding from the state. One of the ways in which, those of us who aren't in Boonville and don't live there and don't have a lot of familiarity with the community, the way we self-educate is by having the community and the consultant team create a downtown profile and assessment. This is basically similar to, the core section of a comprehensive plan, for example. It tells us, about Boonville's history, where they are from a demographic, economic, and environmental perspective, and what their challenges and opportunities might be based on the insights we can glean from data. This is not intended to be a regurgitation of data, but rather it's intended to give us an idea of what type of projects might actually help Boonville, succeed. And it gives us a quantitative basis to identify supporting funding and other planning processes, like a smart growth comprehensive plan update, for example, to help Boonville really take their New York Forward planning process to the next level. One of the most important parts of the New York Forward planning process is the review by the local planning committee of projects that have been submitted through the open call and those that were in the application. But it should say that all projects in the application have to be submitted through the open call too. So right now, the local planning committee is evaluating over 30 projects for their consistency with the program goals that Stefan said earlier, and a series of local review criteria that the LPC established during the second LPC meeting. So to give an overview of what the boundary looks like today and kind of where things are right now, there have been over 31 projects submitted with a total project cost of about $23.7 million. Breaking that down, you have about $19 million in private investment identified, with about $3.96 million in public projects and a small project demand of $460,000. This includes both the New York Forward ask and the funds from other sources. But it's important to note that all project costs must be paid for by the project sponsor up front, and that they will be reimbursed by the state. So it's a considerable outlay of private funds and public funds to start, but we're hopeful that the New York Forward program will not only drive this investment right now for the 31 projects in the slate, but will also generate additional private investment and public investment that will spin off new projects and further strengthen the village of Boonville's revitalization efforts. So in terms of next steps, the fourth local planning committee meeting is next Thursday. So for those of you who are in striking distance of Boonville and have an interest in the planning process, it will be held at the village offices right on 12, right across from Dunkin' Donuts. If you're interested in coming to Boonville, I suggest you stop at Awesome Country for some excellent sandwiches before the meeting, because the meetings go long, but also because Awesome Country has some great stuff. We have a next public workshop, which will be held on October 2nd at Irwin Library. This will be a chance for members of the public to provide feedback on the 31 projects that have been submitted to the local planning committee. And our final LPC meeting will be held on October 24th. This will be the meeting where the local planning committee makes a decision on which projects they want to submit to the state for review. And with that said, I will provide our contact information on this slide. even if you're not in the Mohawk Valley region, if you're interested in the New York Forward program or have questions about this presentation, please feel free to reach out to either of us at the contact information listed here. And with that, I will stop for any questions. And I think we are about 1 minute over 1 minute under time, so we have some more time for questions.
Yes, this session runs until 11:25, so plenty of time for questions. I don't see any in the chat as of right yet, but if you have anything that you'd like to ask or even just some discussion questions, please do feel free to raise your hand, and we can get things started. Okay, from Mickey, or someone in the room at Boonville, must the New York Forward winners post the project/process on their website to keep residents informed? Shouldn't the public be invited to the meetings?
So in terms of New York Forward, so Boonville, short answer is yes. So what Boonville does is they have a web project website called boonvilleforward.org. And there's all the information about the planning process, including, meeting presentations, survey materials, et cetera, that are up on the website. Before every meeting and every public engagement session, we have numerous social media and newspaper press releases go out. We send them to specific newspapers within Boonville and make sure that they go to FLAC broadcasting for broad circulation. And the public, project sponsors and members of the public are invited to the meeting. There are opportunities for public comment during the meeting, and we always make sure that the at least in Boonville, the meetings are held after work hours so that people can attend. And then they have a little bit of breathing time between 5 and 6 p.m. to get some dinner or to attend to childcare issues. So in terms, if you're interested in driving that in your community, my suggestion is to have, your town supervisor, village mayor, city mayor, call up another mayor from a New York Forward community. And there's nothing more than awardees love than to talk about, how they did it, how they won, how it's going. And, for even just to get in the car and drive there and take a look around and talk to people, because that hearing from a peer-to-peer education, education system or education approach is much more effective than having, me going during and talking during privilege of the floor, although I'm glad to do that. There's a numerous Mohawk Valley economic development agencies and organizations that do community visits where we go with a group of citizens and business owners and local officials, and we walk around and talk about New York Forward. I try to drive interest that way. So there's a lot of things that can be done by members of the community. In fact, a lot of New York Forward and DRI applications are usually spearheaded by a very enthusiastic community volunteer. So the sky's the limit for you guys.
Question from Peter Zimmer. Compliments on the presentation, and the question is, are there any New York Forward projects that would ever be ineligible for funding?
Do you want to take that one, Stefan?
Sure, I can try to chime in if I forget anything. Typically, there are a series of projects that are ineligible. For example, one thing that's typically ineligible is a standalone parking improvements along those lines. There are eligibility requirements for project sponsors, such as you have to have site control, and again, there's a lot of project sponsor capacity. What else, Danny?
We don't fund planning, like feasibility studies.
Yep.
But we do fund rezoning efforts in that downtown area that would enable projects to be completed. So for example, if you have, I don't know, a part of your New York Forward area that is its own exclusively single family, and you have a project sponsor that wants to convert a large single family home into like a triplex, we would fund, we would provide funding to update your zoning code to enable that project. We also don't fund, the inventory, and we generally don't fund operation and maintenance of structures. We also pay close attention to whether a project is deferred maintenance or whether it's actually transformative. So the onus would be on the project sponsor. So for example, if you have a building and you just want to, you have a leaky roof and you want to repair your roof and that's it, that would generally be considered deferred maintenance. However, if you have a building and you want to, maybe convert some upper floor, activate some upper floor units for housing that used to be apartments but aren't anymore, and you wanted to create those apartments, we would fund that. If you wanted to upgrade your HVAC system as a part of that project, we would allow that as well, so long as there's a transformative component to it.
Yeah, generally, I'll add the program is pretty broad. There are some eligibility requirements, but this is getting a little bit into the detail. There's something called a small project fund, which can be its own project through the New York Forward, which can serve to award later on. It's administered through HCR. It's basically similar to their New York Main Street program. It can be like smaller scale business assistance or facade restoration. Things that might not be eligible because they're simply not either big or transformative enough as a project. Funding through that mechanism.
I saw someone with a raised hand.
Yes, Brad, go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So a question about the financing part. So say a town village is awarded the 4.5 or $2.25 million grant. I know that it's then it gets it's partly private and partly municipal projects. And I'm wondering, municipal projects have the benefit of getting grants or excuse me, bonds and so forth. But I know this is a reimbursable format. So the private developers or participants have to get financing first and then get reimbursed. So I guess the question is how and what kind of relationship or encouragement do you have working with the banks that get involved with these projects? Have you found that it's kind of is it clear and seamless, or is it challenging? Can you describe that a little bit?
Sure. So I can kind of give multiple examples. So, using an Oneida County, Clinton, Kirkland, they had one of their credit unions, one of their kind of executives from the credit union serve on the local planning committee. I think his expertise, was kind of essential for the planning process because he was able to kind of direct, project sponsors to, their bank to basically provide low interest and competitive financing, bridge financing for their projects. By doing so, he had to recuse himself from a lot of the, project discussions and voting. But I think, having a local credit union kind of be attached to the project, would create a substantial business opportunity for them, but it would also allow them to improve their kind of community development rating as well. So that's one angle. So that's from, Clinton Kirkland being a relatively high capacity community. For other communities, the state maintains a list of community development financial institutions that provide competitive bridge financing to project sponsors. And over the course of the planning process, the consultant team and the state will assist, the project sponsors with compiling the appropriate paperwork to do that. We're very, eager and interested and invested in providing, strong customer service to our project sponsors. So for individuals who may have a little bit of trouble, may not know what to do, there's a lot of help over the course of the planning process in that regard. From the nonprofit sector, if you're in the Mohawk Valley region, the Mohawk Valley Economic Development District provides bridge financing up to $250,000 for the project. And if you are in the small project fund, or you're working with HCR or ESD, they have relatively fast reimbursement processes. So we're able to kind of work with our project sponsors on a case-by-case basis to address cash flow issues. So, very kind of, to sum it up, there's a lot of assistance available. And, the state is very responsive in making sure that, people have the resources they need to complete their projects.
That's great. Quick follow-up. So for the first two rounds of the New York Forward, have you seen that it's been pretty successful and having some ease for the private recipients or participants?
I would say it varies, right? It really depends on kind of the status of a project and whether you're starting a new business or expanding an existing one. So if you're starting a new business, and you may, there's, obviously kind of those years of, where you're in the red, trying to establish your customer base, establish your market, from that side, it can be a little bit tough, because there's sometimes life gets in the way, but overall, from what we've seen for project sponsors who really want to, engage, with the community and with the state and with our, our partner organizations and entities, it's been I wouldn't say it's been smooth, but we provided consistent assistance and we've had relatively good success. Where we've struggled is when, it's difficult to establish a kind of forward direct, a similar direction from the project sponsor side and the state side, whether it's something disastrous happens like a fire or a significant downturn in the market or some other kind of broad focusing event that limits the abilities of projects to go forward. That's kind of where we struggle. But I think one of the benefits of the program is you don't just get an award from the state and we move on. The private project sponsors establish personal relationships with a lot of the folks like Stefan and myself and our counterparts at Empire State Development and Homes and Community Renewal. So we all kind of really work hard to make sure that, private project sponsors can acquire funding to complete their projects, because after all, we want to make sure that the project gets done. So, and then another way we look at it is that the private project sponsor pays our salary. So, we're compelled to work for them and, be as responsive as possible. So I can't say it's been smooth, but we really do our best to get things approved.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, Danny and Stefan. Thank you for your presentation and your expertise. We are on track to do our final presentation of the morning. Let me grab Alana. Let me make you co-host so that you can share your presentation. And let me know if you have any trouble getting that up and running, because I do have a copy of it that I could share and slide forward to. But our final presentation of the morning will take us into noon before the lunch break. So it is entitled Environmental Justice at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Our presenter is going to be Alana N. Kettletucky, the director at the Office of Environmental Justice, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC. And Alana, can you hear us? Can you see us? How are things?
I can hear and see you. Just trying to here's the share button. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Just looking for the area that lets me share my screen. Let me try to find it. Oh, there it is. Big light up green one. Don't know how I missed it, but there. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As just stated, I am Alana Kettletucky. I'm the director for the Office of Environmental Justice here at the Department of Environmental Conservation. And I'm going to just kind of quickly discuss and go over the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act and how it relates to the environmental justice work we do here at DEC. And that's going to include the disadvantaged communities criteria. I'm sure that's some things that people already know or are aware of, but just to kind of get, a little bit into that and hopefully leave some time available for folks to ask questions. So we're going to start with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Obviously, if folks know about the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, it was passed and signed into law in 2019, and it was at the time the country's most transformative piece of climate-based legislation. The goals of the CLCPA were to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 85% below 1990s levels by 2050. And as you see here on the slide, there are a whole host of target-based goals that were designed to create a carbon neutral economy and bring us all into the to a greener future with less air pollution, land pollution, soil pollution, etc. So I'll give folks the opportunity to look at that, but obviously this information is also available on climate.ny.gov if anybody wants to see it, but here are the basic sort of goals of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And what actually made the CLCPA so transformative was that a lot of this was based in climate justice and in environmental justice. So this climate-based statute actually was a climate justice statute because there was the inclusion of environmental justice principles in the form of disadvantaged communities and what eventually became the disadvantaged communities criteria. So what you'll see here is just description of what disadvantaged communities are. So under the Climate Act, they're defined as communities that bear negative burdens of negative public health effects. They have higher levels of environmental pollution, suffer the impacts of climate change, and possess socioeconomic criteria that's indicative or have higher concentrations of low and moderate income households. So the goal of this definition was to highlight communities that have been specifically impacted by discriminatory practices. They are underrepresented, underfunded, and have for a long time experienced environmental racism. So these communities are typically on the front lines of the more extreme impacts of climate change. So this includes extreme flooding, other weather changes, and largely in urban areas, extreme heat. So these communities under the Climate Act are going to be targeted for greenhouse gas and co-pollutant reduction, and also to receive a 35% of the benefit of state-funded renewable energy and energy efficiency spending. So in order to get to this definition or get to what is a disadvantaged community, we introduced the Climate Justice Working Group. So in addition to identifying, the general definition of what a disadvantaged community is, to aid in actually really diving into what areas should be identified as disadvantaged communities, the Climate Act established the Climate Justice Working Group. So this group consists of 9 environmental justice advocates, community members, or representatives that are from either New York City, 3 from New York City, 3 from upstate urban communities, and 3 representatives from rural communities, and 4 state agencies, which include the Department of Environmental Conservation, NYSERDA, Department of Health, and the Department of Labor. So in mid 2020, the Climate Justice Working Group began to actually meet and discuss how to identify disadvantaged communities based on the statutory requirements. And it was decided that the data sources used would need to be applicable on a statewide basis. And because of the census tracts became the geographic boundaries that we use to identify DACs, that's the information that occurs is fairly consistent on a statewide level. Additionally, as the CLCPA identified that 35% of the benefits, as I said before, of renewable energy and energy efficiency spending would be realized in DACs, the Climate Justice Working Group then determined that we would include 35% of New York State census tracts as DACs. And so for anybody who was who started paying attention and monitor the process, you'll know that the Climate Justice Working Group began by reviewing over 170 potential indicators for inclusion over the course of almost 3 years. And in the end, the working group settled on 45 indicators that fit the statutory goals of the CLCPA and that were supported by that high-level granular statewide data. And so here you'll just see the list of indicators that we chose. So we divided them into 2 factor groups. So environmental burdens and climate change risks. There are 20 of those indicators. And as you'll see here, that includes issues such as the traffic vehicle density, extreme heat projections, regulated state management plans, or major oil facilities, power generation, agricultural lands, driving time to hospitals, flooding, benzene, water discharge, etc. The second factor category was population characteristics and health vulnerabilities. There are 25 of these that were included. And so you'll see this is where we got into the specific health issues that are sort of connected directly to those environmental burdens and climate change risks, and also indicators that will indicate whether or not a community might be suffering. So for example, high housing cost burden, energy poverty, asthma, COPD, high unemployment rates, etc. And these were items that were definitely identified in the legislation as items that we should be reviewing. So now we'll get into how we use the disadvantaged communities criteria. And as I stated earlier, the CLCPA requires that these areas of the state be targeted for greenhouse gas and co-pollutant reduction and are receiving the benefit of state-funded renewable energy and energy efficiency spending. So the CLCPA also has the added assurance via Section 7.3 of the statute that no actions taken by state entities, whether they be administrative, et cetera, can disproportionately burden identified disadvantaged communities. So what that really means is that when we're looking at our policies and what we're doing as an agency, whether that be permitting, whether that be taking on other administrative actions, we have to assure that the actions that we're taking are not providing a disproportionate burden. So we also, that's been included and implemented into other areas of the statute. So we're looking at, for example, there was recently an environmental siting law. So some are calling this cumulative impacts law. So that might be more familiar to folks. So this law was passed in 2022, and it seeks to enshrine the elements of 7.3 of the CLCPA actually into statute by identifying specific basically identifying specific permitting strategies and permits and projects, and assuring that the projects that are taking place cannot provide a disproportionate burden to disadvantaged communities. So that also is viewed in our siting regulations. So currently DEC is working on amending seeker and the Uniform Procedures Act requirements, and that will assure that the activities that we take on at DEC when it comes to siting and when it comes to this do not continue to overburden identified disadvantaged communities, many of which already are suffering from having a higher level of polluting facilities or identified facilities that may cause additional pollution in their communities. Another aspect that we've used in how we've implemented the CLCPA and implemented those disadvantaged communities criteria is in DEP, or Division of Environmental Permits. It's policy 20-4-1 that was recently finalized. So that provides guidance to DEC and other agencies and how we would implement elements of Section 7.3 when it comes to not disproportionately burdening disadvantaged communities with our actions. That will be most likely revised when we complete the promulgation of the regulations. Another item is CP29 revision. So for folks who are not familiar, there's an internal policy at DEC that specifically deals with how we permit in what are identified potential environmental justice areas as defined by DEC. So this policy has been around since 2003, and the goal will be to make sure that many of these elements in the CLCPA that include protections for disadvantaged communities are also realized in potential environmental justice areas, many of which are not included in the disadvantaged communities criteria because of the indicators that are used. The disadvantaged communities criteria is also identified in the Extreme Heat Action Plan. As folks know, Governor Hochul directed the development of the Extreme Heat Action Plan to provide a roadmap for coordinated state action and action across all extreme heat active planning. That was actually recently finalized. So I encourage people to visit our website, dec.ny.gov, and look for the Extreme Heat Action Plan and definitely review that. Dr. Leo Battinger worked very, very hard with partners to develop that plan. It's a great plan. There's a lot of hard work that went into that, and they definitely deserve a round of applause on that. And the last item I want to highlight is community air monitoring. So the Climate Act requires DEC to conduct air monitoring in 4 disadvantaged communities across the state. This was increased to 10 DACs by the governor. Our Division of Air Resources worked with ACLMA to collect data using mobile collection sources to collect data in these communities. They engaged with community members and community groups to determine exactly what those routes would be. And they are now in the process of letting communities know exactly what the results of the community air monitoring program was, and discussing now the mitigation strategies. So a big part of this plan was to take that data and that information that was developed and determined by the community air monitoring plan to develop a larger action plan for the state in general, specifically identifying mitigation strategies for these air pollution, for these polluting areas, and for, different disadvantaged communities and across the state in general. So our Division of Air Resources is actively working with the communities to develop those strategies. And so now we'll have a quick chat of funding opportunities, and then we can get to some questions. So while not directly DACs, the Office of Environmental Justice has offered grants for community-based organizations since 2006, but we have now included disadvantaged communities also within the umbrella of community-based organizations in areas that we consider for being eligible for our grants. And so those grants include Community Impact Grant. That's our oldest and our most popular offering. It covers a diverse range of projects that range from community gardens to water testing, green infrastructure. It is, like I said, it's our most popular offering because it really does sort of run the gamut. You can come in and use that grant money for a whole host of items. And so we just finished a round of community impact grants, and we're looking to have another one in 2025. So anyone who's interested in that grant funding should definitely visit our website. Another grant that we offer is Green Jobs for Youth. So this funding aids in preparing youth between the ages of 16 to 24 for the green economy. That includes training, education, and certification opportunities. It allows for youth who maybe haven't had those opportunities presented to them to actually work closely with practicing professionals or to actually take classes to help them determine their place in the green economy and actually develop those skills. And like I said, get certification and even degrees. So we're very proud of that program. Another program that we run is the Administration of Capacity Building Grants. So I maybe didn't state before, but Office of Environmental Justice only gives grants to community-based organizations. And we have some very sort of, I'd say strict, but relatively strict requirements about who is not eligible for those grants. But even with those requirements, since the goal of our grant program is to allow for smaller community-based organizations to fund the projects that they're looking to fund to mitigate environmental damage in their communities, we still are aware that many of the organizations, specifically those that deal with environmental justice areas and environmental justice issues, are volunteer run and not as well funded as some of the larger environmental organizations. And even applying for our grants can be a bit of a challenge, especially since applying for state government grants does include a lot of extra registrations and requirements. So this grant allows for a community-based organization, perhaps a larger one, to actually provide micro grants to these small non-government organizations that actually may lack those resources to apply for those larger grants that are offered by the state agencies. So it assures that our funding is getting to those who actually very desperately need it. The last grant that I'm going to identify is air monitoring. So this is a relatively new grant. It provides community-based air monitoring or air pollution mitigation grants for community-based organizations to do sort of that hyper-local targeted air monitoring. We released one recently, and so we'll look to see if that comes out again. We are looking to potentially release another grant that's targeting mitigation. So I always tell folks to visit our website and to keep aware and to keep up to date on which grant opportunities are available. And the last item that I will cover will be the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Bond Act. So as folks remember, that Bond Act that got overwhelming support from the voters, and that provides $4.2 billion to state and local governments and partners for environmental and community projects. And a part of that is that the Bond Act actually requires that 35% of the funding go to aid disadvantaged communities, sort of in the spirit of the CLCPA. So money is being handed out. So far, only a small percentage has come out. So there will be more, obviously. It's $4.2 billion we wanted out the door. So definitely visit the Bond Act website and view the eligibility requirements and what's needed, and help us get that money. We have money. We can't keep it for ourselves. Help us spend that money. And that is all I have today. So does anybody have any questions?
There's one question in the chat regarding the website. Do you have that link handy, or?
Hold on a second. The website for DEC or the website for, which website?
Millie, can you please clarify in the comments? Thank you.
Oh, sure. So you want to go to dec.ny.gov. And I think the easiest way is actually to Google Office of Environmental Justice, because there's a lot of extra in there. But if you Google Office of New York State DEC Office of Environmental Justice, or put Office of Environmental Justice in the search bar when you go to dec.ny.gov, you'll see our landing page, and there'll be a link right there to the grants.
Our next question comes from the in-person folks in Boonville. Is there a process for petitioning a census tract that wasn't included in the DAC designations to become designated?
No, the DACs are actually determined by a methodology, which includes all of those indicators that are weighted and then turned into percentile points and then weighted against each other. So because we did that, and there's a actual percentile threshold that you have to meet in order to be a DAC. So we can't arbitrarily add communities to, or census tracts to, the disadvantaged communities criteria. But what does happen is that the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act requires that the Climate Justice Working Group review the disadvantaged communities criteria on an annual basis. And part of that is also reviewing how the disadvantaged communities criteria is working. So the Climate Justice Working Group is currently in the process of reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria, and there, in those viewpoints, there are the potential to add additional indicators that may help to increase our offerings. There's also, so that's basically how that's done. But no, we can't just add communities. There's no petitioning process. But what we do allow is for, if you do have suggestions for indicators that you feel may more properly represent your census tracts or your areas, you can submit those to either justice@dec.ny.gov or climatejusticewg@dec.ny.gov. And I can put that in the chat. And I see another question that says, beyond indicators, will changes in demographics be evaluated regularly? So the demographics are, all of that is determined by the census. So those are determined, like I said, that census tract information. Obviously the census is updated every 10 years, but we also utilize American Community Survey data, which is updated a little bit more regularly. And that's based on, that's still based on that data, but it comes out every 4 to 5 years rather than every 10 years. So we will review that data in all data sources. So every single data source that is reviewed and listed as part of the disadvantaged communities criteria, and those 2 factors that identified, all of those are reviewed on an annual basis and checked against the American Community Survey and any other related census data. So basically we use our census data and we do update regularly, but also bearing in mind that a lot of the data sources that are used are not updated on an annual basis. Some are only updated every 5 years or every 7 or so years, but people are identifying that. We do have a group that looks at and reviews that information.
That was going to be one of my follow-up questions with ACS, was whether you use the 5-year, or I know there are the 1 and 3-year estimates, but I know obviously those don't have the same, it's not quite the same, like level as like the decennial census data.
Right.
A comment, thank you for everything you do. Unfortunately, there are state level agencies in our nation that do not have a director for environmental justice.
That is true. And we would like to see more agencies that have environmental justice. And if you are, just to point out, just for New York State's purposes, there was another piece of legislation that passed at the same time as the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It it created Article 48 of the Environmental Conservation Law that requires that all state agencies that have any sort of tangential relationship or could potentially affect environmental justice communities do have to have an environmental justice coordinator. Now, this doesn't exist on a nationwide level, but it does exist at the state level. So I think that New York State can continue to be a leader in this by assuring that every state agency that should have an EJ coordinator has an EJ coordinator. And then we can take this state to state and put some gentle pressure on state governments that do not have environmental justice directors or environmental justice programs.
Thank you. Another question from Boonville. Can you speak to how the DAC designations compare to the federal Justice 40 areas?
Absolutely. So we have about 70 to 80% alignment with Justice 40. The difference is that Justice 40 actually uses fewer indicators and doesn't use certain indicators that we've used. So because the indicators and the sets are different, they're not going to 100% align, but they, like I said, they do align at about 80%. So that's fairly good. But what we've determined is that for state purposes, we've noticed that there are times when the federal government has allowed the use of states that have determined their own sort of disadvantaged communities criteria to use that information. But we generally will look at both. But when it comes to state resources, we're looking to use our disadvantaged communities criteria. Absolutely.
And we still have about 10 minutes, so if there are any other questions, comments, or discussion items, please do feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand.
And I went over my presentation relatively quickly, so if there are any slides you want me to go back to, please let me know.
I guess I have a question to keep
Sure.
the ball rolling. With your position as director for a state agency, is there anything at the federal level that exists? Because there's so many federal programs that are fed in through the state. Is that a thing yet at the federal level or no?
It is actually, it's very recent, and there was an Office of Environmental Justice for some time, but it's now recently grown and become more enshrined in the EPA. So EPA does have its own Office of Environmental Justice. They have offices across the state. It's largely their Region 2 office. And they are really doing, I think, an amazing job. We're actually working with them currently on an EPA DEC roadshow to sort of take our messaging across the state. So again, please sign up for press releases so you can be informed of that. But yes, EPA does have its own Office of Environmental Justice, and they do have a specific Region 2 office.
Anything else before we break for lunch? It's tough to precede lunch, Elena, I think.
Oh, I see that somebody's asking, yes,
Okay.
so what we have right now, so the Community Impact Grant is the only one that's announced right now. That one just recently closed. We will be announcing another grant very soon. So please check that website. And then if another good opportunity thing to check is to go and look at, you'll see we'll have a listing of recent grants. It'll give you an idea of grants that we funded in the past, and also all of our data for all of the grants that we have offered and awarded is available through open data, and you can review those and just get an idea of the sorts of opportunities that are offered, and the sorts of grants and applications that we accept, and also the community-based organizations that are eligible. And you can check to make sure that your eligibility is similar to theirs. There is a listserv. So if you go to our website, you'll be harassed by a pop-up that asks you if you want to sign up for emails and email alerts. So you'll click on that. If you put your email in, you can actually choose whether or not how many different programs you want to hear from. I don't suggest signing up for all of them because you'll get every single email from DEC, and we send a lot of emails out, but you can pick and choose what programs you want to hear from. So you can be Office of Environmental Justice. You can also hear from our Office of Climate Change. You can get regular updates from our Division of Water, and hear about recreational opportunities. So if you aren't signed up for emails and regular emails from the Office of not just Office of Environmental Justice, but also from DEC, I highly recommend you get on our website and do that. It's, you know, there are things that I work here and there are things that I've learned that are going on the agency that I wouldn't know if I wasn't getting these updates. So highly recommend. Oh, and if folks are interested, I know it's not our program, but you should visit the EPA's grants website and also sign up for alerts for their grants as well. You don't just have to use state money. You know, we want you to get all the funding that you can get.
I guess a follow-up question, questions that I tend to get a lot regardless of who is hosting a grant program. What would you describe your entity's capacity in terms of being able to offer technical assistance for grant programming? Is this something that if, say, if someone's developing an application that they can talk to or reach out to specific staff that might be able to help them answer questions and things like that? Or what would you say?
Absolutely. So we don't at this time offer technical assistance grants, but we are always available to answer questions. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say I have the best grants team in all of government, period, ever. Some people might disagree. I think they're wrong. And I absolutely 100% have the friendliest grants team in the world. So they are always available to answer questions. So if anybody does need to speak to somebody, I would say that if you're just looking for eligibility and just to have some questions answers, that'd be great. The only warning I have is do not give us specifics about what you're looking to do, because that might prevent us from being able to review your project if we know about it in advance. But if you have some general questions, please feel free to call us. I'll put our general number here in the chat. And give us a call and ask for a member of our grants team, and they would be elated to answer any questions that you have.
Well, thank you very much, Alana. That was wonderful. A lot of information. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. It doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat, so I think we can maybe wrap up a couple minutes early. Again, thank you very much for your time today. And everyone, we will be having a lunch break from noon to 1, and then we will be back for 2 sessions in the afternoon. So
Thank you
with
for
that,
having me. And
thank you for being here.
And I just put that in there. If anybody has any questions or something that just pops up into their head later on, feel free to email us justice@dec.ny.gov.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great lunch break. We'll see you in a little bit.
All right, bye.